Good evening. And tonight, from a Fifth Avenue brownstone in New York City to a Newport cottage full of salt wind and lawn tennis, you step into the rules Gilded Age women really had to follow, where the bent corner of a calling card could say more than a page of honest words. Welcome back if you have settled in here before, and a quiet hello if this is your first time with me. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, whether that is a small bedroom in Delhi, a sofa in Boston, or a rainy midnight somewhere far away, and leave it in the comments because I really do read every one. If you would like to fall asleep here again, please like and subscribe, and I will be here for you next time too. Have you ever felt that one tiny choice could somehow be read as your whole character? So the house takes you in. The room holds the scent of hothouse gardenias and beeswax polish, while the French ormolu clock ticks above the faint brush of silk across polished parquet. Downstairs, Bridget is already sorting the silver calling cards on the hall table and giving the first sigh of the day to whatever has gone wrong. You wake not to silence, but to order. That is one of the first lessons of this world. Your day never begins when your eyes open. It begins earlier, in the pantry, in the servants' hall, at the kitchen range, and at the front door where someone has already left a card. The bed is high and soft beneath you. The linen is cool at the edges and gently warm where sleep has lingered. The curtains hold back a pale New York morning, and the coal fire has fallen into a neat red glow. The ormolu clock on the mantelpiece keeps time with a rich little tick that sounds more expensive than other clocks. You suspect this is one of its main duties. In houses like this, even time is expected to present well. Your morning tea waits on a tray near the bed. The silver pot has a knitted cozy over it. The cup is thin enough to show a blush of light through the china. There is toast wrapped in a folded napkin to keep it warm. There is a slice of orange on a glass dish. There is one small jug of cream, which looks innocent and costly in equal measure. You sit up slowly, because no one elegant ever appears to leap at the day. The pillows rustle behind you. Somewhere below, a door closes with the careful firmness of good training. Then comes Bridget. She enters with the special quiet of a servant who has already been awake for hours, carried water, folded linen, spoken to the cook, and formed opinions about everyone before breakfast. She has your wrapper over one arm and a face arranged for duty. Duty does not prevent judgment. Her first sigh arrives before her greeting. It is a brief exhale, which means mild disapproval. A long, slow release would mean approaching disaster. An audible inhale followed by silence would mean she has chosen mercy, and you should be grateful. This morning's sigh is short, but not cheerful. It carries the message that something downstairs requires notice. It also carries the gentler message that, in Bridget's view, morning itself remains an overrated arrangement. She sets your wrapper at the foot of the bed. She smooths the tea tray cloth with one practiced hand. Then she tells you that the silver calling card tray in the hall already contains an item that cannot be ignored. The tray, you have learned, is never truly at rest. It sits on the hall table with bright innocence and low intentions. Cards slide on it, hide beneath one another, and appear in new orders that Bridget swears she did not make. At least once each social season, it tips its full contents onto the floor at the worst possible moment. In modern terms, it is Gilded Age LinkedIn, if LinkedIn were made of silver, surrounded by hothouse flowers, and capable of ruining your week before noon. Your card is your profile. The tray is your inbox. Removal from a visiting list is account suspension with no appeals and no customer support. This is not an exaggeration. It only sounds like one because the system is dressed in cream cardstock and very fine engraving. A card can mean a welcome, a warning, a debt of politeness, or the cool beginning of exile. It can say that someone has called in person. It can say that someone has remembered your dinner. It can say that someone has not forgiven your dinner, but remains too civil to use plain words. You take a sip of tea while Bridget opens the shutters another inch. The room brightens slowly, like a thought deciding whether it wishes to be spoken. Outside, the street is already working. Carriages pass with softened rumbles over the avenue. Hooves strike the pavement in a steady pattern. Far away, a vendor calls out in a voice that reaches this room as if through several layers of money. Bridget brings the washstand things into order. The basin water sends up a faint thread of steam. Your hairbrushes gleam on the dressing table like polished little instruments for a daily campaign. You are newly married, which means you are still being looked at with the special sharpness reserved for new arrangements. An old married woman may have small oddities, a new one may have none. That is the hidden mathematics of this house. You are allowed youth, but not uncertainty. You are allowed style, but never surprise. You are expected to glide into your husband's world as if you had always been there, though half the rules were never said aloud to you even once. Mrs. Hartwell would say this is because true breeding requires no instruction. Mrs. Hartwell says many things that become less convincing the longer she says them. She has been in New York society since the 70s, and she wears authority the way other women wear jet beads. Her favorite opening line is now famous in the family. Mrs. Astor would never have permitted this, she says, before naming whatever has offended her that day. Then she closes with a smile that leaves the entire decline of civilization in your lap. Mrs. Astor herself need not be present for Mrs. Hartwell to summon her. She can produce Mrs. Astor from memory, principle, and air. It is a useful skill if one enjoys haunting breakfast rooms. You finish the toast in small, careful bites. Crumbs are not tragic, but they are untidy, and untidiness spreads in this world by rumor. Bridget hands you the cup again, and waits with the patience of a woman who knows the morning is not negotiable. She tells you that there are 2 new items on the morning tray upstairs. One is a calling card from Mrs. Vandermeer, 2 brownstones down. The other is a sealed letter in a hand she does not know. That unfamiliar hand alters the room by a degree, not much. This is not a Gothic novel, and no one is rushing down a corridor with terrible news. Still, an unknown hand has a way of sitting in the mind more heavily than a known one. You ask where Bridget has put it. She tells you it is on the mantelpiece, unopened, where it may remain until you are properly dressed. This is partly prudence and partly ceremony. In this house, one does not open uncertain correspondence while still in bed, with hair loose and laces untied, like a person in a railway novel. Unknown words should meet a composed face. That is the theory, at least. The truth is simpler. If you opened every strange letter at once, you would spend the whole day giving your nerves first claim on your time. Society prefers nerves in the background, powder on top. Bridget lifts the wrapper around your shoulders. The fabric is soft from use. It smells faintly of lavender starch and the cedar drawers where it rests. She helps you from the bed and into the slippers waiting on the rug. The floor beyond is cool. The house is warm enough, but never wastefully so, because even luxury likes to imagine it has principles. At the dressing table, the mirror gives you a face that is still your own and already somewhat public. Morning light finds every softness. It also finds every small truth. This is why the dressing hour is never only about getting dressed. It is about editing. It is about deciding which version of yourself will go downstairs, receive cards, answer letters, and survive the hallway. Bridget begins with your hair. Before the corset, before the bodice, before the fitted armor of the day, there is the long, patient work of arranging what grows from your own head into something society can trust. Loose hair belongs to childhood, privacy, illness, or bedtime. None of those may attend breakfast. Your hair has slept in braids to keep the wave under control. Bridget loosens them with quick, steady fingers. She brushes from the ends upward, then from crown to length, until the darker shine appears. The brush strokes are not rough. They are firm and rhythmic, and they gather thought into order. Many women claim to hate the brushing. Many of the same women become uneasy when it ends. A society morning hairstyle has rules hidden inside fashion. It must be smooth, but not hard. It must suggest care without visible labor. It must sit high enough to be neat, low enough to be sensible, and secure enough to survive visitors, luncheon, the carriage, and several opinions. For a newly married woman, the hair must also say something quiet and exact. It must show youth, because youth is one of your market values, though no one would use that vulgar word aloud. It must also show settlement, because you are no longer a girl with ribbons and possibilities. So Bridget parts, smooths, lifts, and coils. She twists the side sections back. She draws the longer weight into a knot that looks effortless, only because it is not. On the dressing table lies a small dish of pearl pins. They wait in a pale scatter, like obedient little moons. Bridget selects them one by one, never more than needed, because excess decoration in daylight invites comment, and comment multiplies. Pearls are safe in the morning. They say you are tasteful. They say you are fortunate. They say nothing too loud, which is often the best thing jewelry can say before noon. Bridget slides the first pin into place, then the second, then a third. angled just enough to catch the coil, without showing its own work. The updo firms under her hands, and your face changes with it. This too is part of the magic trick. Hair arranged means your expression seems more decided, even if your thoughts remain half-wrapped in tea steam. You watch your reflection shift into its public lines. There is powder still to come, and bodice, and the many private constructions that make a polished woman appear to have simply happened that way. But the hair is the first clear announcement. No one in the breakfast room will admire the engineering. They will simply register the result. A good hairstyle in 1892 is like a well-managed household. It is noticed only by its failure. Bridget gives a small sound in her throat and adjusts one curl near your ear. A single soft line there keeps the arrangement from looking severe. Severity is useful in an aunt. It is less charming in a bride. You ask whether the card from Mrs. Vandermeer was left by hand. Bridget says yes, and with the corner turned. A turned corner can mean a personal call. It can also mean the card was delivered in person when the caller did not come up, or was not received, or preferred not to be received. In this world, cardstock acquires the emotional complexity of a whole orchestra. Mrs. Vandermeer lives close enough to be unavoidable and far enough to remain formal. She has the smooth face of a woman who never appears ruffled, because she has chosen to let others do that for her. Her compliments are famous in 3 drawing rooms and feared in 7. How very brave of you, she likes to say. She says it to bold hats, risky guest lists, unusual flower choices, and one memorable bonnet that had done nothing to deserve the experience. She says it so evenly that you are never certain whether she means courage or collapse. A card from Mrs. Vandermeer cannot be tossed into the harmless pile. There is no harmless pile, really, but there is an area of lesser immediate danger. Her card does not belong there. It demands interpretation, then response, then probably some delicate counterweight somewhere else in the week. Bridget sees this plain enough, though she would never name it in those terms. She secures another pearl pin and gives a short sigh that means she, too, understands the weather has changed. Some mornings the barometer is silver and engraved. You ask whether any other cards came. A tradesman's account was delivered separately. That, Bridget reports, has gone to your secretary for the time being. How kind the household can be when it wishes to postpone your character development. Debt moves through these houses with very quiet shoes. High society loves the appearance of endless abundance. It enjoys flowers out of season, suppers after the theater, imported lace, French shoes, and carriages that shine even in bad weather. The bills arrive by the servant's entrance and speak in a much plainer tone. In that sense, debt is the original influencer lifestyle. The product is your seeming ease, the content is your wardrobe and dinner table. The invoices come in folded envelopes, while guests praise your effortless grace over oysters. You are not thinking about invoices just now, though they travel at the edge of the mind like weather off the coast. Today is still young enough to pretend it belongs to appearances. Bridget reaches for the comb and begins the final smoothing. The teeth pass over the top of your hair with that gentle pulling sound that belongs only to dressing rooms. A few loose strands catch the light and are persuaded into obedience. The room itself seems built for these rituals. The carpet softens every footstep. The wardrobe doors stand tall and patient. The mantelpiece holds the clock, 2 silver frames, and the letter in its unfamiliar hand, resting among respectable objects as if it has every right to be there. You look at it in the mirror rather than directly. This feels less intimate. The seal is dark red, the paper is thick and cream, which narrows nothing at all. An unknown hand can mean almost anything in your world. It can mean a woman you barely met at a musicale, now trying to widen acquaintance. It can mean a charity committee seeking your name for a subscription list. It can mean a dressmaker's warning disguised as politeness. It can mean a relation no one mentioned until now. It can also mean trouble, but even trouble here tends to arrive folded and scented, then wait politely on a mantelpiece until you have your stays on. The age is nothing if not decorative in its timing. You let it remain there. That is not weakness. It is discipline, or at least the kind that looks very similar from across the room. A woman who appears ruled by her correspondence is already losing ground. She places the brush down with quiet finality. Then she brings the little puff of powder. Powder in the morning is not a theatrical cloud. It is a soft correction. It takes away shine from the nose and forehead. It lets the face meet daylight without seeming to have argued with it first. You close your eyes while she touches it over your skin. The scent is faintly violet and rice. The powder settles lightly, and with it arrives that peculiar feeling of becoming not false exactly, but edited toward acceptability. This century asks women to look natural by means of intense method. It is a very efficient arrangement for selling both effort and denial. Still, the result is pleasant enough, and no one at breakfast wants to meet your fully candid forehead. The underlayers of the day begin next. Bridget lays them out in order over a chair, each one quiet, pale, and deceptively innocent. A chemise first, then stockings, then garters, then the corset waiting like a decision. After that come petticoats and the outer dress that the world will think is the whole story. It never is. A great many truths in this age live in the layers no one mentions. Money lives there. Health lives there. Marriage often lives there too, in little ways both practical and unspeakable. You step out of the wrapper. The air touches your arms and back. Bridget holds the chemise open, and you slide into it. The linen falls cool over the skin. It is plain compared with the dress to come, but not crude. Good underlinen matters because comfort matters, though society prefers to pretend women are held together by virtue alone. Stockings next. They are silk, because your station requires it. They slide over the feet and calves with that dry whisper silk makes against skin. Bridget fastens them neatly, and the garters rest where they should without drama, which is all anyone can ask from a morning fastening. There is a clean, practical peace in these first layers. They are close to the body and mostly hidden from judgment. You almost get to be only a person for a few minutes. Then the corset arrives, and personhood becomes architecture. Bridget lifts it from the chair with both hands. It is pale, shaped, and more serious than any item with such decorative stitching has a right to be. The busk in front gleams faintly. The corset is not a villain, though it is often cast as one. Plenty of women like the support, plenty hate it. Most do what women have always done with difficult objects. They make terms with it, complain privately, adjust where they can, and carry on because the day ahead does not pause for principles. Still, the corset is the central physical event of the morning. Everything else may be revised, added, removed, or tinned again. The corset sets the terms. It decides how you breathe, how you sit, how your dress falls, and whether your whole silhouette will satisfy the invisible committee that sits in every drawing room. You hold the front while Bridget brings the corset around you. The inner edge meets the chemise. The shape is familiar by now, though it still feels faintly improbable that a day should need this much fastening. The busk closes one clasp at a time, first the top, then the middle, then the lower hooks, which always seem to require an extra moment, as if metal itself wishes to express an opinion. Once the front is secured, the true work begins at the back. Laces hang there in their long crossing ladder. Bridget gathers them in her hands and gives the first firm pull. The corset tightens only a little, enough to announce its presence. You inhale. She pauses. This is the ceremony of cooperation. A bad maid rushes. A good maid watches the breath. Bridget, whatever her size may imply, is very good. The fabric closes closer. The pressure settles around the waist and ribs like a new definition of uprightness. The body responds by rearranging its expectations. There are women who lace brutally. There are doctors who thunder. There are cartoons full of fainting ladies and moral lessons. Real life, as usual, is duller and more exact. A daily corset in a respectable house is less a swoon machine than a contract. It asks for posture, restraint, and some planning before luncheon. In return, it offers shape, support, and the great social comfort of looking correct from the hallway. Bridget works from top and bottom toward the waist. The laces slide with small dry sounds through the eyelets. She pulls, smooths, checks, and pulls again. Your hands rest on the dressing table. The wood is cool beneath your fingers. In the mirror, you can see the set of your shoulders sharpen into what the day expects. This is not pain exactly. It is insistence. It reminds you that comfort in this world often depends on prior inconvenience. A dinner dress sits properly because the morning has already been negotiated with linen, whalebone, patience, and the practical intimacy of another woman pulling strings behind your spine. The final tightening comes in 2 measured draws. Bridget knots the laces. She slips 2 fingers at the back to test the fit, because skill lives in fingers more than in rules. There, you can breathe. You can also breathe differently than before. The breath sits higher, the waist feels held. The back is suddenly more eloquent, as though your bones have been informed they now represent the family. Bridget reaches for the corset cover and settles it over the stiff lines. It softens the edges for the layers to come. This too is a small kindness no one downstairs will ever thank. Then come the petticoats, one, then another. They fasten at the waist and fall in increasing confidence. Their job is bulk, smoothness, insulation, and the production of the right little swish when you walk through a doorway. A dress never simply hangs. It is built from beneath. That is true of clothes, and rather a lot else besides. Respectability, marriage, hospitality, and calm all depend on unseen structures working very hard, while the visible surface pretends it woke up arranged. The petticoats brush your legs in soft layers. The sound is private and lovely. It is almost enough to make you forgive the effort. Almost. Bridget pauses to hand you more tea, now warm rather than hot. It tastes slightly stronger, as tea always does when a corset has reminded you of earthly limits. You drink carefully, because one does not spill on underlinen if one can help it. While she readies the morning dress, your eyes return to the mantelpiece. The letter remains where she placed it, with the seal unbroken and the handwriting neither familiar nor vulgar. That makes it either harmless or especially dangerous. Untidy writing at least gives you a warning. You ask Bridget if there was any crest on the seal. She says none she recognized. Then she adds in a tone of professional neutrality that the paper is good. Good paper is not always good news. It only means someone paid for thick silence. There are rules about letters just as there are rules about everything else worth mishandling. One answers promptly, but not greedily. One writes clearly, but not too much. One never commits to paper the kind of truth that may wander into a lawyer's hands. A clever woman of your set learns that ink remembers more faithfully than friendship. The safest letter is brief, gracious, and nearly useless to posterity. Historians are left to dig through the compliments and guess where the real life went. That hidden life is what makes this whole world hum. Pregnancies are managed with strategic shawls, changed travel plans, and a sudden devotion to country air. Debt is cushioned with invitations, flowers, and another season in Newport. Grief is measured in fabrics so exact that mourning becomes a public timetable. Even sorrow must be dressed correctly. Mourning wear in this age functions almost like a verified grief status. Black crepe announces recent loss. Gray bombazine moves the calendar forward. Half mourning allows soft lilac, mauve, or lavender to say that time is past. Though not too insolently, it is both touching and faintly exhausting. If your heart is broken, society is very sorry to hear it, and it would also like to know whether you are at deep black, second black, or perhaps ready for subdued purple by Thursday. Human feeling is translated into fabric inventory with admirable confidence. You are grateful this morning asks only for pale day dress and careful handwriting. Bridget lifts the gown from its hanger and shakes the skirt very lightly. The fabric gives that soft rustle which sounds like money learning manners. It is not evening brilliance, it is daytime polish. The bodice opens in front for convenience. Even convenience here comes with trims. You step into the skirt while Bridget steadies the fabric. She fastens the waistband. Then the bodice comes over the corseted frame that has made room for it. Buttons follow. So many buttons. A fashionable woman's day is held together by an astonishing number of tiny choices disguised as closures. Hooks, eyes, tapes, buttons, pins. The 19th century trusted no one, and especially not a bodice. Bridget fastens from lower front upward. The cloth settles smoothly over the corset. The sleeves are arranged. The collar sits high and proper at the throat. A high collar changes conduct at once. It asks the neck to behave. It gives the chin a small duty. By the time the last fastening is done, you feel not merely dressed, but briefed. Bridget stands back and studies the whole effect. This is one of those moments when a maid, a lady, and society itself all seem to share one pair of eyes. Does the line please? Is the color safe? Does the skirt fall cleanly? Have you become the correct woman for 10 o'clock? Her answer is another short sigh. That means there is work left, but no scandal yet. She adds cuffs, she straightens the fall of the sleeve, she changes one brooch for a plainer one after only a moment's thought. Daylight is less forgiving of ambition than gaslight. At last, she brings the calling card tray book from downstairs because the actual silver tray has offended her too deeply to be trusted in your room. This book records names, dates, and obligations with the quiet severity of a family Bible. You sit with it while she folds your wrapper away. Vandermeer's card. Thick cream stock. Sharp engraving. Her husband's name printed in the manner proper to a married woman, because marriage in print has a way of making a lady vanish behind her spouse, while expecting her to manage everything anyway. That may be one of the strangest rules of all. As a married woman, your card now carries his name before your own existence has had much chance to object. You are socially enlarged and personally abbreviated in the same movement. Society calls this elevation. The corner is indeed turned. You picture the footman delivering it. You picture the hallmaid receiving it. You picture Mrs. Vandermeer in her carriage, serene as varnish, deciding exactly how much intention to fold into that small angle. Why today? Perhaps because she wishes to be first after your recent dinner. Perhaps because she has heard some tiny thing and wants to see how you answer. Perhaps because she was merely passing and felt charitable enough to let you wonder. How very brave of you, you can almost hear her say. It is never wise to answer Mrs. Vandermeer in the same mood she creates. That is one of the unwritten rules no one states because, like many useful truths, it sounds obvious until you are tired. You will leave a card in return, of course. Promptly but not breathlessly. Correctly but not with such haste that she feels you were waiting by the window. Grace in this age depends heavily on the appearance of having a life beyond the immediate insult. Bridget asks whether your own card case should be set out. Yes, you tell her, and the plain ivory cards as well as the engraved ones. A newly married woman needs options. Cards for formal returns, cards for calls, cards for flowers sent in proper acknowledgement, cards for the 1,000 little transactions of being seen and seeing back. A social day can be conducted almost entirely through paper rectangles. One leaves cards after a dinner. One sends them after receiving an invitation one cannot accept. One leaves them in mourning. One leaves them for a bride. One leaves them while in town. One leaves them on departing town. If sincerity ever enters the system, it does so in disguise. Still, there is a strange comfort in the rules. They are tiresome, but they are legible. A folded corner means one thing. A left card means another. If people must wound one another, it is almost soothing that they do so with engraved stationery, rather than raised voices. Bridget closes the book and moves to the mantelpiece. She dusts carefully around the unknown letter without touching it more than needed. That restraint gives it weight. You stand and cross to the fire. The clock continues its rich, patient ticking. The gardenias below have sent their scent upward through the house. Beeswax from the polished banister lingers in the air. The whole room smells like discipline trying to pass for ease. At close view, the letter tells you little more. The hand is steady. The direction is proper. Your married name looks formal there, almost like someone else's. You do not pick it up yet. Instead, you look at your reflection in the overmanteled glass, hair smooth and pinned, collar set, waist drawn in, face powdered into composure. Somewhere inside all this arrangement, the private self remains present, though it now moves with care. This is the true morning rule of a Gilded Age woman. Not simply that you wear the right thing, not simply that you answer the correct card in the correct time. It is that you learn to keep the machinery hidden. The maid may know, the seamstress may know, the secretary may know, the cook usually knows more than anyone, but the room must never know. The room must think your hair happened. The room must think your dress falls this well by nature. The room must think invitations answer themselves, accounts settle themselves, pregnancies retire temporarily to the country, and grief obediently changes from crepe to lavender on schedule. The room must think you glide. Bridget brings her cuffs once more because one has displeased her. She changes it in silence. You are glad of this. Few things are more tiring than commentary before breakfast. Then, as if the house remembers its own comedy, someone below bumps the hall table. You do not hear the full disaster. You hear only a bright metallic tilt, a scatter of sliding cardstock, and Bridget closing her eyes before she breathes out. It is not the long, slow release of catastrophe. It is very close. Somewhere downstairs, cards now lie over the polished floor in democratic confusion, putting bishops, widows, neighbors, and nuisances on the same level for one glorious minute. If the tray had a soul, it would be Irish and opinionated. Bridget turns to the door with the expression of a woman called by fate and poor furniture. Then she pauses, because your face has gone toward the letter again. You nod once. Go on, you tell her. The cards need rescuing before identities begin to mingle beyond repair. She leaves with a look that says the house may fall, but it will not fall unsorted. For a moment, you are alone, not truly alone, because no one in a great house is ever very far from footsteps, but alone enough for the clock to sound a little larger. The room settles around your breathing. You take up the letter at last. The paper is smooth and thick. It gives a faint, crisp sound beneath your fingers. The seal is firm but not aggressive, which is about the best one can say of any sealed message before breakfast. And there you stand in your Fifth Avenue room, already dressed into shape, already entered into the day's small ledger of cards and replies, while downstairs Bridget gathers the fallen names from the floor, and the hothouse gardenias go on scenting the air, as if none of this requires any effort at all. By late morning, Mrs. Vandermeer's card has become the brightest object in the hall. It lies on the silver tray with the blank patience of a cat near cream. The tray rests under the pier glass where the beeswax smell lingers longest. The French ormolu clock keeps ticking, and each tick makes delay sound slightly more expensive. Her card is thick and pale, and almost offensively calm. The engraving is dark and neat, with margins wide enough to suggest complete confidence. You touch one edge with a gloved finger. The pasteboard feels smoother than your own, which is already a small irritation. The sealed letter on the mantel still waits in its strange hand. Even mystery, it seems, must stand in line behind calling cards. Bridget appears with a small pile of cards balanced on her palm. She gives one brief sigh, which means the situation is not yet fatal. She sets the new arrivals beside the tray and straightens the old ones. The most important card is somehow still at the very bottom, where the tray likes to keep its little surprises. No one says that the hall table is the true center of the house. Everyone behaves as though the drawing room deserves that honor, which is very kind of them. But the drawing room only shows the result. The tray shows the score, while the game is still being played. A dinner invitation can flatter you for one evening. A neat stack of cards can keep you alive until Easter. Every card means someone has remembered your name on purpose. Every missing card means someone has remembered it even more carefully. The house learns to read the tray the way sailors read weather. A thin day means quiet dinners and too much pudding left over. A crowded day means the footmen move faster and the cook grows lofty. It means flowers are ordered, lists are revised, and chairs seem to multiply in corners. The cards must never lie any which way. Names face the same direction, edges line up, and those needing answers stay apart from those already settled. Cards from old families are not buried under hasty new money. Cards from shop counters never share the same silver surface at all. A visiting card may look like nothing more than a stiff white scrap. In your world, it is a whole biography with the verbs removed. It says who has noticed you. It says whether they noticed gladly, reluctantly, or because the season required it. Mrs. Vandermeer's card says all three at once. That is part of her gift. She lives near enough for the distance between your doors to feel insulting. 2 brownstones is nothing for a carriage, and a great deal for pride. A card left from farther away can be simple duty. A card from 2 houses over has intentions pressed into its corners. This is the first lesson the tray teaches you. Nobody merely calls. A new bride learns that a call is never just a call. It is a declaration about who may approach whom, and under what light. The order matters before a word is spoken. Sometimes the order matters so much that words only get in the way. In theory, the rules are beautifully clear. Older women receive the deference due to age. Established houses receive the deference due to long possession. And young wives move with caution. In practice, each rule arrives wrapped inside 3 exceptions and a family story. By the time it reaches your hall, it looks simple again, only because everyone pretends. A woman newly settled in a house may be called upon by neighbors first. A woman newly married may wait to be acknowledged by those whose notice makes her place more secure. A younger wife should not storm ahead of older matrons like a cavalry charge in silk. That would look eager, which is the one quality money cannot dress properly. Yet no reigning lady likes to appear to be receiving petitioners. So the most powerful women often make the first move in a way that looks like generosity. A first call can therefore mean welcome. It can also mean possession. If a grand lady leaves her card first, she can later speak of her kindness. If you call first on her, she can later speak of your ambition. Society runs very well on this arrangement. It allows everyone to feel superior while behaving almost correctly. A neighbor like Mrs. Vandermeer sits in the interesting middle. She is neither a stranger nor a queen, which leaves room for invention. Her card could be read as grace from an established housewife to a newer one. It could also be read as an attempt to fix you one step below her in broad daylight. This is why a card can weigh more than a silver tea service. Paper is very light until everyone agrees to notice it. The house itself seems to understand this. Even the taffeta at your hem makes a more careful sound over the parquet when you pass the tray. Your own cards wait in their ivory box near the writing table. They are smooth, sober, and properly engraved with your married name. There are more rules packed into those few inches of card than into some marriage settlements. The cards are white but never creamy enough to look playful. The lettering must be clear but not bold. Flourishes are tolerated only up to the point where they stop resembling money and begin resembling feeling. A married woman's card should have a certain breadth to it, without looking crowded or vain. A husband's own card is smaller and simpler. It tends to look like a quiet little boat following behind a grander ship. A young unmarried girl has smaller cards still. Her name takes up less room because society allows her fewer sentences. Widows may use their own given names again in certain forms. That small recovery of self arrives wrapped in black borders and practical sorrow, which is a very Gilded Age arrangement. No one admits that they inspect one another's cardstock. Everyone inspects one another's cardstock. They notice thickness first. A card too flimsy suggests saving pennies, and a card too heavy suggests a stationer with theatrical ideas. Then they notice the cut of the edges. Roughness means carelessness, and a gloss too bright looks almost commercial. Then they notice the size. One fraction too large can make a respectable wife resemble an advertising circular. Mrs. Vandermeer's card is exactly correct, which is maddening. She has chosen a stock so proper it feels like criticism. The corners are where the language becomes more secret. There, etiquette gives up any wish to be reasonable and becomes embroidery done in code. In your circle, a corner turned down can mean you came in person. It can also mean a special form of regard, depending on which corner and who is doing the reading. The upper right corner, neatly bent, often shows personal delivery. The left side may suggest inquiry or particular notice, though households defend their own interpretations with surprising tenderness. A lower corner can hint at farewell before travel. That one has sent many people into summer with more excitement than steamship trunks really justify. The trouble is that no two aunts explain these corners in the same order. Yet every woman looks at a bent edge as though she learned the system from Moses. Because the rules wobble from drawing room to drawing room, confidence becomes part of the code. A decisive corner can mean more than a correct one. Mrs. Vandermeer has left her card flat. That is not relief. A flat card can be plain civility. It can also be a refusal to offer you any useful clue at all. You turn the card toward the window, and then back again. It remains a smooth white rectangle, which is exactly how a trap prefers to look. Timing is its own dialect. A call made at the wrong hour speaks louder than one made with the wrong hat. Formal calls belong to the late afternoon. Before 3, you risk looking as though you came to inspect plumbing. After 5, the hour begins to soften into intimacy. That is a different kind of danger and requires different gloves. A proper visit is short enough to leave no deep mark on the furniture. 15 minutes is thoughtful, and 20 suggests either real affection or jam too sticky to escape quickly. If a lady is not at home, the card remains. It stands in for your face and records that your carriage wheels passed her door at the right moment. If she is at home and receives you, the card is still left. Society likes paper proof even when flesh has already done the work. Much depends on whether the call is first, return, ceremonial, or strategic. They are all made with the same little card, which is rather like using one spoon for soup, pudding, and medicine. A return call should not arrive at once. Haste makes gratitude visible, and gratitude places you lower than you may wish to stand. Yet a return call should not wander in weeks later either. Delay turns dignity into insult, and insult is a bill that comes due with interest. 3 days is often safe in town. The next proper reception day can be safer still. A lady's day at home may be printed in the lower corner of her card. That tiny line tells half of New York when to descend upon her sofa. If no day is printed, everyone must rely on memory and servants. This keeps the servants indispensable and gives memory far more work than it deserves. Some households receive only on Thursdays. Others say they are not at home every day except the days when they suddenly are. The butler at the door becomes a kind of priest in this system. He interprets presence, absence, and tone with all the gravity of sacred office. A good one can convey that his mistress is unavailable without bruising anyone. A poor one can start a feud before the caller reaches the carriage step. Bridget knows this in the way only a servant who handles every consequence can know it. She picks up Mrs. Vandermeer's card again and lets out a longer sigh. This sigh says that paper has become work. It says your answer must be planned before luncheon, or the day will taste of metal. You carry the card into the morning room where the fire has gone low. The scent of hothouse gardenias from the mantel bowl makes the whole problem seem prettier than it is. On the table beside your blotter lies your own neat stack of cards. Beside them sits the little silver pencil used for those rare notes that may be written upon one. Most cards should remain untouched by ink. A message scribbled on the front can look hurried, and one on the back can look alarmingly personal. Pencil may be allowed for a formal inquiry after illness. Pencil may also be used for a brief word before travel, though only by those who enjoy living near edges. A real letter is another thing entirely. Letters belong to family, intimacy, business, and crisis, which is to say the 4 places society most likes to disguise. You consider a note to Mrs. Vandermeer and reject it at once. Notes are too warm if civil, and too cold if brief. Flowers are impossible. Fruit is absurd. A verbal message through servants would grow extra words before reaching her hat stand. So you return to the clean problem of pasteboard. It is amazing what can be attempted with a small white rectangle and enough self-control. The first question is whether to call in person or answer by card only. The second is whether those are actually different things. A card may be sent by servant, which is useful and bloodless. A card may also be left by you after your carriage stops and the bell is rung. That distinction matters more than comfort. One shows duty fulfilled from a distance, and the other shows a body brought to the very threshold. To call in person on Mrs. Vandermeer too eagerly would hand her a tiny triumph. She would be able to say, without saying it, that you hurried to answer. To send only a card by a servant might look thin. She could then speak without speaking again, of coolness on your side. This is why so many women become experts in arriving physically and emotionally at exactly half distance. It is the most crowded place in society. You think of paying your return call on her next afternoon. You imagine the route, the trim of your bonnet, the exact gloves least likely to imply a story. One does not wear a dramatic feather for a first strategic call. Feathers speak before their owners and rarely choose the wisest words. A visiting gown should rustle softly and sit well in a carriage. It should suggest that your life contains many calls, and none of them trouble you. A parasol may be carried if the light is bright. It must not look as though it has opinions. You would bring one of your husband's cards as well as your own. Households acknowledge households, even when the men involved are doing something loudly practical elsewhere. A wife often leaves her own card for the lady of the house. She may leave one of her husband's for the master, and sometimes another for an adult daughter, if the daughter is established enough to need her own piece of paper. These small distributions are done with a straight face. Somewhere in the city, fortunes are being made, and here you are counting rectangles. The silver tray receives all of them back home and turns them into patterns. By the middle of the season, it resembles a map drawn by people too polite to use colors. Cards from women who matter most are kept where the eye falls first. Cards already answered are moved aside before they can accuse you further. Bridget has made little habits around this system. She stacks active cards near the front, and she keeps doubtful ones under the edge of the tray, as if cooling them. Cards from travel, printed with that faint little PPC, go to a separate pile. Farewells should not lounge beside luncheon invitations like ordinary company. Cards with mourning borders must be handled quietly. Even on paper, grief expects the right amount of space. The tray is dusted around, never over. A housemaid may touch the cloth beneath it, but not the order within. If a card slips out of place, the whole story shifts. A woman can look newly favored or suddenly neglected by nothing more than a careless thumb. This makes the tray much like a ledger and much like a stage. It also makes it, in a faint way, malevolent. The important name sinks. The urgent answer hides. The one card you need most appears only after you have already decided something foolish. It is, in that sense, the only object in the house with social instincts of its own. Even the ormolu clock is kinder. You sit and decide that you will answer on the third afternoon. You will go yourself, leave your card properly, and stay only if received at once. It is a sensible plan and has the modest glow sensible plans always have before relatives arrive. You even feel a little pleased with it. Then wheels stop outside in the wrong part of the day. A moment later the bell rings with the confidence of kin. Mrs. Hartwell enters as though invitations are pleasant traditions for other people. She removes her gloves finger by finger and looks first at your face and then at the card. She does not ask whether she is interrupting. That question would suggest the possibility of an answer. Bridget takes her cloak with an audible inhale and a deliberate silence. This means she has thoughts too large for household use. Mrs. Hartwell settles herself near the fire and accepts tea before it is offered. She holds Mrs. Vandermeer's card between two fingers as if testing pastry. Mrs. Astor would never have permitted a neighbor to establish precedence by pretending to be generous, she says. Then she smiles as though civilization still rests precariously on your shoulders. This is not, you know from experience, her most alarming tone. Her most alarming tone is the very soft one that follows when she begins to improve things. She asks when the card arrived, who carried it, which servant took it, and whether the butler announced that Mrs. Vandermeer had left it personally. Each answer seems to disappoint her in a fresh direction. Then she asks where on the tray it was found. This, to her, is nearly as important as the call itself. You admit it had slid beneath 3 lesser names and a bookseller's notice. Mrs. Hartwell closes her eyes for one thoughtful second. The pause is not for prayer. It is for tallying the decline of standards since 1878. She rises and moves to the hall table with purpose. You follow her over the polished floor, the silk at your ankles whispering that trouble travels faster than reason. She surveys the tray and begins to reorder the cards without asking permission. Her hands are small, dry, and astonishingly certain. This name above that one is social illiteracy, she says mildly, and these answered cards should have been tied away yesterday. She explains, while she sorts, that a tray must tell the truth quickly. It must show what is pending, what is returned, and what is no longer a living matter. Nothing stale should remain in the active stack. Stale cards, she says, create stale judgments. A card older than a week without action begins to look deliberate. A card older than 10 days becomes a statement, whether or not you intended one. She prefers narrow ribbons for tying away answered cards. Gray is safest, white shows dust, and blue is adventurous in a way no storage system should be. She makes a separate small pile for the women who must be watched. Vandermeer's card is placed there alone, which seems somehow worse than giving it company. Then, because the tray always chooses its moments, one edge catches in her sleeve. 6 cards slide, flutter, and spread themselves over the parquet like startled doves. Mrs. Hartwell does not apologize to the room. She simply looks down and says that silver without weight is a modern vice. You kneel to gather the fallen cards. The pasteboard feels cool against your fingers, and every name seems suddenly more intimate from floor level. Bridget appears soundlessly with the expression of a woman vindicated by furniture. She restores the tray to order with the silent efficiency of a battlefield nurse, only much calmer. When the cards are straight again, Mrs. Hartwell returns to the true offense. Your proposed answer, she says, is entirely wrong in 6 distinct ways. You had meant to go on the 3rd afternoon. She says that would make you punctual in the manner of a clerk. You had meant to stay if received. She says that would surrender the terms of the exchange to Mrs. Vandermeer's butler. You had meant to leave only your own card. She says families answer families, and you are married now whether romance is caught up or not. You had not planned to turn a corner. She lifts one brow and lets that omission sit between you like damp air. Mrs. Astor would never have permitted a flat return to a card of uncertain intention, she says. The sentence lands with the crispness of cut glass. Now the lecture broadens into complete strategy. She speaks as though placing troops, only the troops are you, a carriage, and 2 visiting cards. First, you must not answer on the very next proper day. That suggests you have cleared your schedule around Mrs. Vandermeer, which no sensible woman would ever do visibly. Second, you must not drift too far beyond it. A delayed answer can look as if you required consultation, and consultation implies insecurity. The correct moment, according to Mrs. Hartwell, is the late part of the second suitable afternoon after receipt. That sounds less like time than like architecture, but she says it firmly. You are to go yourself. Presence matters. You are to arrive near the end of visiting hours, when any household is slightly tired and less likely to stage manage its own charm. This, she says, is not manipulation, but prudence. Your carriage must stop fully and not roll on. Rolling on suggests fear of welcome. Your card is to be handed in with the upper right corner turned. The bend must be clean and made before you leave home, not fretted into shape in the vestibule. One of your husband's smaller cards is to accompany it, perfectly flat. His paper should never mimic your social embroidery. If Mrs. Vandermeer is not at home, the matter is elegantly complete. She will know that you came in person and answered correctly without offering more than was due. If she is at home and receiving, you may be shown in. In that case, everything depends on measure. You are to sit where you are placed and praise nothing too specifically. Specific praise can be repeated back with dangerous exactness. You may speak of the weather, the crush of calls, a recent musicale, or the poor behavior of roses in city heat. Roses are safe because they disappoint everyone equally. You are not to mention the order of visits. You are not to mention Newport, because Newport turns every ordinary sentence into campaign material by August. You must not accept a second cup, because a second cup implies ease. Ease is lovely in friendships and ruinous in rivalries. You must remain no longer than 12 minutes. Mrs. Hartwell says 12 with the solemnity of Scripture. If another caller arrives while you are there, you rise soon after. One never lets oneself become part of another woman's receiving line, unless one intends to join the furniture. If no one arrives and conversation softens, you rise anyway. A graceful exit is worth more than a brilliant remark, particularly if no brilliant remark has occurred. You listen because there is nothing else to do. Mrs. Hartwell has already dismantled your earlier plan into such small pieces that it could line a birdcage. She continues into finer points. Gloves stay on until seated, then may be loosened but not removed if the call remains formal. Your veil, if worn, should be lifted without fuss. Fumbling at the face suggests nerves, and nerves are news. A visiting card case must be easy to open with one hand. No lady should battle a clasp at a rival's door. The card itself should be clean and ungenerous. By that she means there should be no little penciled flourish, no friendly line, and certainly no note asking after anything at all. A call is not a conversation continued by paper. It is a footprint left at the proper depth. She asks to see your card case and inspects the stack. 3 are slightly marked where the corners rubbed against metal, and she removes them at once. These are for cousins, she says, or for people in Philadelphia. It is impossible to know whether this is a joke. With Mrs. Hartwell, humor and correction often wear the same bonnet. The afternoon light has moved by then, turning the hall mirror pale. The gardenias have warmed, and their scent seems thicker in the room. You begin to understand why so many women talk of fatigue in the season. They do not always mean dancing. To remember who calls first, who returns, which corner is bent, and how soon it may be bent back into answer is tiring in the way lace is tiring. It looks airy and feels exact, and yet there is a strange comfort in its exactness too. The rules are absurd, but they are also something to hold. They tell you where to place your hand, how long to stay, when to leave, and what not to write. For a young wife in a large house, that can feel almost like a railing on a dark staircase. Mrs. Hartwell believes this deeply. She distrusts spontaneity the way some people distrust oysters. According to her, a woman keeps her place by never seeming surprised. Since life insists on surprises, paper must do the compensating. She points again to the tray and says it should be reviewed twice daily in season. Once before luncheon and once before dressing for dinner. Morning review is for action. Evening review is for memory and repair. Cards that need answer are set forward. Cards answered that day are moved away before night, so the house may sleep without unfinished obligations staring from the hall. This seems a little severe, but also sensible in its way. Unanswered cards do have a way of glinting after dark. She advises that your social secretary, when you eventually admit you need one, should keep a ledger of calls, dates, names, addresses, at-home days, and every return marked in a tidy hand. It sounds less like leisure than bookkeeping in satin. Society has always loved labor, as long as it arrives beautifully dressed. For now, Bridget keeps the household memory in her head and under her breath. Mrs. Hartwell says this is admirable, but dangerous. Servants remember too much and can fall ill at the worst times. Paper, she says, rarely catches cold. You glance toward the hall where Bridget is passing with fresh hot water. The look on her face suggests she has built her whole week around other people's poor timing. A mistress may imagine she governs her calls. The maid who finds the cards, answers the bell, and presses the visiting gown knows better. Mrs. Hartwell finally sits again and allows herself cake. She takes the smallest slice, which makes it feel like a moral instruction. Then she returns to Mrs. Vandermeer specifically. The woman, she says, is clever enough to use courtesy as a measuring rod. A too hasty reply will let her say, "You are gratified." A too cold reply will let her say, "You are uncertain of your ground." The entire art is to answer fully without yielding any extra warmth. It is like closing a window against weather while pretending to enjoy the breeze. So your return must be exact and lightly impersonal. Enough respect, no dependence. If admitted, you are to inquire after her health in one sentence and no more. A second inquiry can sound as if you have heard gossip. You may admire a flower arrangement if one is truly remarkable. You may not admire a room because rooms can be repeated back as comparisons. You may say her card found you out, which is merely fact dressed as ease. You may not say you are sorry to miss her, because sorrow is a ladder. You begin to hear how much of society depends on the size of each word. Even the safe sentences must be buttoned carefully. Mrs. Vandermeer herself favors compliments that arrive wrapped in gauze and pins. You remember one from a recent dinner about a sleeve, a smile, and courage. That is why her plain flat card feels less innocent than a rude note would have. With rudeness, at least the furniture can relax. Outside, a carriage passes, and the sound softens quickly in the street. Inside, the clock ticks on with a French steadiness that suggests all this is perfectly normal. Soon enough, the room is filled with practical preparations. Your best afternoon gloves are brought out and inspected at the fingertips. A card with a clean upper corner is set aside for the call. Your husband's smaller cards are counted, because somehow they vanish faster than spoons. The visiting dress for that day is chosen with caution, not new enough to look staged, and not familiar enough to seem neglected. The bonnet is the quiet one with the trim that behaves itself in doorways. Society forgives many sins before it forgives a hat that must be rescued from upholstery. Bridget lays these things out with great control. She gives no sigh at all now, which is somehow more impressive than the sighs. Mrs. Hartwell approves the shade of your ribbon and disapproves the lace at one cuff. The lace is changed within minutes, as if it had offended Parliament. Then, having revised your plan, your wardrobe, the tray, and almost certainly the axis of the earth, she rises to go. She leaves behind a faint scent of violet water and successful interference. At the door, she reminds you that a return call is not gratitude. It is acknowledgement, which must never look hungry. When she is gone, the house feels wider and slightly tired. Even the gardenias seem to release their breath. You stand a moment beside the hall table and look at the ordered tray. Mrs. Vandermeer's card lies where it can be seen and not forgotten, which is perhaps the best one can ask from an adversary. The silver surface reflects the white rectangles in a soft blur. Their edges look almost gentle there, like folded linens waiting for use. But each one is still a record. Each one still says who stepped forward and who stepped back. You slide your chosen card into the case and test the bend of its corner once. It holds its shape with alarming confidence. There is comfort in having a plan, even one borrowed from a formidable aunt. There is comfort, too, in knowing that absurdity, if shared by enough houses, becomes tradition. Soon you will descend the brownstone steps and make your measured answer. You will do it in silk and kid gloves and calm. For now, the tray is quiet. The clock ticks. The card waits. And you know at last how to answer without bowing an inch. By the time the second pin is set at your collarbone, Your waist has already become arithmetic. You stand before the long mirror in your dressing room. The gardenias downstairs send up a sweet, thick scent that almost counts as breakfast. Bridget moves behind you with the calm of someone tying down a traveling trunk. She closes the busk one clasp at a time. Then she begins the laces in small, patient pulls. Nothing happens quickly, though the result must look effortless by 11 o'clock. That is one of the first rules worth keeping. Labor must never show on the finished surface. You wear a thin linen chemise under the corset. The cloth keeps the whalebone and steel from rubbing your skin raw by noon. It also has to be washed often, because starch and summer heat are nobody's friends. The corset itself waits on a chair before dawn like a strict little machine. Its pale satin panels look innocent in the dim light. Its eyelets have other ideas. Bridget does not pull straight through at once. She tightens from the top and the bottom first. Then she works inward, from each side with the care of someone tuning an instrument. You learn to breathe in useful portions. A deep breath is lovely in poetry. A measured breath is far more practical when hooks and laces have opinions. There is a brief pause halfway through. Bridget gives one short sigh that means the tape measure has not been kind. You pretend not to understand this fluent household language. A quarter inch can alter the whole morning. It changes which bodice closes neatly. It decides whether luncheon may include chicken salad or only broth and patience. The ideal waist is spoken of as if it simply blooms on the vine. In truth, it is encouraged, persuaded, and bullied by inches of cord. It is also supported by very selective menu planning. You notice these things most when dressing, because the body becomes a series of tasks. Hands smooth the chemise, hands fasten the busk, hands settle the corset cover so no ridge will show through silk. Then come the petticoats, each with its own rustle and purpose. One keeps the skirt from clinging, one protects the better fabric above it, one gives the line that says prosperity without ever needing to use the word. Button boots wait on the rug. It is easier to fasten them before the laces are drawn too snug. Bending afterward becomes an activity best left to younger cousins and dropped handkerchiefs. You discover that chairs have personalities in this life. A deep upholstered seat is charming until you try to rise gracefully from it. Straight-backed chairs are merciless, but at least they are honest. Stairs must be taken in an even rhythm. Haste presses the stays against your ribs in a way no one mentions at dinner. Slow steps keep the face composed and the bodice smooth. A well-bred silhouette asks little favors all day. It asks that you not twist too suddenly for a teacup. It asks that you turn from the waist as if you are part of the furniture. At first you think the rule is beauty. Soon you learn the true rule is continuity. The line established at breakfast must survive calls, carriage rides, tea, and a dinner that begins long after appetite has lost interest. You keep small habits for this purpose. A ribbon of peppermint lives in your reticule. A folded fan waits to create an inch of private air between your face and the room. There is also the matter of food, which society pretends to adore and approaches like a suspicious cat. Morning chocolate is allowed in little cups. A roll may be admired from a distance. At luncheon, soft things are your allies. Clear soup behaves better than game pie. Fish is forgiving. Chilled peaches look virtuous and require almost no negotiation with the laces. By late afternoon, the waist you present to visitors has become a joint enterprise. Your own will does some work. Bridget does the rest. The dressmaker, the corset maker, and the cook all take small secret shares. Nobody says this aloud, because mystery is part of the decoration. The same table that holds silver and roses must also hold the idea that elegance costs nothing. The odd part is how quickly your body begins to think in these terms. You learn where to place a hand when sitting. You learn how far to lean without wrinkling the front of a bodice. You even learn to laugh in portions. Too much sudden amusement can nudge a hook loose or shift a collar. Society likes wit best when it arrives under perfect control. The faint rustle of silk across the parquet becomes a kind of report on your success. Crisp taffeta says the skirt hangs well. A drag at the hem says something underneath has slipped its duty. Even your rest is managed. A half hour on the chaise after returning home is not idleness. It is maintenance, like brushing velvet the proper way or airing kid gloves near an open window. There is no season when the body may be plain equipment. It must remain a polished surface, like the beeswax stair rail that gleams because somebody rubs it every day. From the outside, the result looks simple. A narrow waist rises from the skirt, shoulders slope softly above it. The whole figure reads as natural, which is society's favorite fiction. Once you are laced and pinned and brushed, the dress itself begins speaking in a language of tiny hints. The fabric says one thing, the trim says another. The shade adds a whisper underneath both. Taffeta announces itself before you enter a room. Its dry rustle travels around corners and reaches the hall first. Satin is quieter, but it loves lamplight too much to be trusted with modesty. Velvet keeps its own counsel. It absorbs gaslight and gives back a deep, soft richness. It is excellent in winter and dreadful in July, when the body and the fabric begin private hostilities. A bodice in dark green can suggest settled confidence. Pale blue near the face looks young, which may or may not be useful, depending on who is watching. Cream says leisure, because cream does not forgive carriage dust. Sleeves matter as much as color. A sleeve with extra fullness at the shoulder can make the waist look smaller without any honest contribution from the waist itself. Society admires this sort of assistance when it is cleverly hidden. The line over the hips must be considered from 3 directions. From the front you want smoothness, from the side you want a controlled curve, from the back you want enough shape to imply ease without ever admitting engineering. Inside the dress there may be tapes, little pads, hooks, and one stern strip of boning where no guest will ever see it. A scene can carry more diplomacy than a speech. You come to know fabrics by touch in the dark. Bombazine feels dry and serious. Silk fail has a rib under the fingers. Crepe catches lightly at the skin like a warning. A day dress for calls asks to look finished, but not hungry for attention. Evening silk may shine more openly, because candlelight is a permissive judge. Morning wrappers enjoy freedoms denied to almost everything else. Even ribbons can overstep. Too much sheen at the wrong hour suggests cheerful ambition. Too little trim at a large dinner suggests either saintliness or a troubling lack of good advice. Mrs. Hartwell inspects these matters with the solemnity of a bishop examining doctrine. Mrs. Astor would never have permitted a glossy bow before 4 o'clock, she says, and then she smiles very gently. You begin to hear the code everywhere. Jet buttons say one thing, pearl buttons say another. A row of tiny covered buttons down the back says you can afford time. Necklines are equally busy with meaning. A high collar in daylight protects respectability and the throat together. An evening opening may widen, but only within the exact border between charm and discussion. Gloves keep the story going. Light kid gloves imply that life has arranged itself neatly around you. Black gloves carry another message entirely, and sometimes arrive with a weight no one can lighten by talking around it. Even a parasol has opinions. White lace belongs to one mood, plain silk belongs to another. The handle in carved ivory can suggest old money, or merely a determined shopkeeper with very persuasive inventory. What matters most is that every surface works together. If the dress hints at modest restraint, the hat cannot shout. If the color murmurs youth, the jewelry should not attempt a second louder speech. You are never only dressed. You are translated into public language each morning. The household performs the conversion with brushes, pins, tapes, and a silence that is almost professional. That silence grows most careful around black fabric. This part deserves to be told plainly. Morning clothes in your world are not just sad clothes. They are a timetable worn on the body. They tell everyone how recent the loss is and how much brightness you are permitted to carry. First morning is the strictest stage. The black must be dull rather than glossy. Crepe is common, though it snags and frays and behaves like a material personally offended by weather. Jewelry becomes limited and careful. Jet is proper because it absorbs light instead of tossing it back. Diamonds are too lively. Pearls are sometimes allowed later, when grief has been measured into a gentler shape. The veil matters too. In the first period it may fall long and heavy from the bonnet. It alters sound around your face and dims the edges of the street. The gloves, the fan, the trim on the bonnet, even the handkerchief border have to keep the same discipline. A glint too many can look like carelessness. Carelessness is the last luxury mourning permits. A woman in recent mourning may refuse dinners, balls, and theater invitations without offense. Society understands that the dark dress has shut certain doors for a time. It also notes very closely when they open again. The calendar of grief is exacting. Months pass and fabrics may soften by rule. Black silk can replace the first rough crepe. Trim may return in very modest amounts, like plants reappearing after frost. Then comes a middle stage that still keeps to black, though with less severity. The bonnet grows lighter. The veil shortens. Surfaces are allowed a little life again, but never enough to seem eager. At last half-mourning arrives, which sounds cozy, and is anything but simple. Gray may appear. Soft mauve may appear. Lavender may appear in the faintest breath, like color remembering itself after a long illness. These shades carry relief and anxiety together. They feel almost cheerful after months of black. They also invite inspection from every angle, because nothing alarms society like a transition made 1 week too soon. The rules do not pause for weather, travel, or the social season's appetite for spectacle. A woman can be required by grief to sit through June, wrapped in dull black layers that absorb every bit of sun. In Newport, where the salt wind usually asks for pale muslin and easier colors, mourning can make the whole summer wardrobe sulk in its drawers. White tennis dresses may flash across neighboring lawns, while black crepe keeps to the shade. Practical problems gather quietly around these garments. Crepe collects lint with morbid enthusiasm. Sea air roughens it. A sudden rain can leave the hem heavy and tired as a wet curtain. Servants brush and air and mend, yet the cloth still looks stern. It is not meant to flatter. It is meant to show that beauty has stepped back and decorum has taken the front chair. There is tenderness in that, though it comes wearing rules. The dress gives the bereaved woman a kind of public shelter. It tells the room what cannot be nicely said over teacups. Then, because society remains society, it also turns sorrow into something to be decoded at a glance. That is the strange small chill under all this order. Even grief must arrive correctly pinned. After weeks of such darkness, half-mourning colors can feel as gentle as fresh sheets in a room long shuttered. A gray ribbon or lilac flower on a bonnet carries more air than its size suggests, yet even that return is supervised. Elder relatives remember dates, dressmakers keep notes. The silver calling card tray, unreliable with ordinary life, receives condolence cards and somehow makes the whole stack look more solemnly disordered. There are visits of sympathy to answer and visits to postpone. Black-bordered stationery lies ready in a drawer. The very paper has to agree with the dress, so the message and the envelope do not quarrel. The body inside all this fabric must still be fed, rested, and moved about the day. Mourning does not excuse a poor fit. A black bodice that wrinkles across the front can seem almost disrespectful in its own way. So the same hands keep working. Seams are altered, veils are hemmed, skirts are brushed free of street dust that appears as gray as flour against the black. When the strict period lessens, people speak of color returning as if it were spring. They choose ribbons against the cheek and decide whether lavender is safe yet. It is a quiet occupation, like testing the warmth of bath water with one finger. By then, the lesson has settled in fully. Cloth can announce joy, restraint, wealth, boredom, youth, widowhood, caution, fatigue, and ambition before you say good afternoon. It can also announce absence. That becomes important in another way, and no one uses the simple word when there are softer ones available. You first notice the change in other women before you learn its route for yourself. A figure that was always present at calls begins missing from the afternoon list. A place at dinner remains politely unfilled for several weeks. The explanation comes wrapped in phrases that drift like lace over a mirror. She is resting. She is not receiving. She has gone to the country for quiet. Her health requires discretion. Pregnancy in your world is treated as both ordinary and unsayable. Everyone knows it happens. Good manners require that knowledge to wear gloves. At the start, the work of concealment is mostly done by dress. A belt is shifted slightly higher. Pleats are arranged to release a little more room. The seamstress lets out a side seam by the width of the thumbnail. Breakfast wrappers become unexpectedly important. Their fronts cross softly over the body and tie with ribbons that forgive small changes. A morning spent upstairs can be managed in one with almost indecent comfort. For visits that cannot be avoided, darker colors help. Busy patterns distract the eye. A cape or little jacket keeps the line uncertain in a way that society is willing to call charming. Soon the plan usually changes from disguise to disappearance. A woman in your set does not advance through late pregnancy under gaslight and scrutiny if she can help it. She recedes instead, as if the season has gently misplaced her. The house learns the script at once. Callers are told that you are fatigued. Flowers are carried upstairs. Trays arrive on quiet feet and leave with the cups hardly touched. Your world has many words for this retreat. Confinement is the blunt one. A blessed event is the prettiest one. Neither is spoken much above a murmur. Rooms contract around you in those months. The front drawing room becomes too public. The upstairs sitting room with the watered silk curtains becomes the safer center of the day. From there, you may still manage parts of life. Notes are dictated or written in pencil on your knee. Fabric samples are brought up for approval. The nursery list begins in a notebook that closes the instant footsteps sound outside. There are practical purchases hidden inside the hush. Fine lawn for baby shirts, soft flannel bands, narrow ribbon for ties, tiny socks that look less like garments than like folded promises. The parcels do not arrive by the front door, if everyone can help it. They come through the side entrance with brown paper removed before any visitor happens by. Respectability loves a wrapping room. Bridget's audible inhale followed by silence tells you she has seen a cradle invoice among the household accounts. Her mercy on this subject is more eloquent than speech. As the months pass, your own clothing changes its manners indoors. Corsets may be loosened or replaced by softer supports made for the period. Laces that once argued every morning are suddenly expected to behave like civilized companions. The relief is real and almost suspicious. To breathe freely by noon feels at first like cheating, then it feels like remembering your own ribs. You spend more time seated near a window with sewing in your lap. Some women hem baby linens themselves for luck or calm. Others direct the work and merely stroke the cloth, which also counts. Needlework baskets become excellent hiding places for plans. Under a square of embroidery silk there may be a list of nursemaids to interview. Beneath that there may be a note from the doctor, folded to half its size. The doctor enters by side habit as much as side door. He speaks in lowered tones to your husband or aunt. Then he comes upstairs carrying an air of professional vagueness that suits everyone. Society accepts this vagueness because naming the female body too clearly would threaten the whole arrangement. It is easier to discuss sea air, fatigue, tonics, and rest. Rest can cover almost anything with a tidy blanket. While you are absent from dinners and opera boxes, the season keeps moving. Cards arrive, rumors fold themselves, someone else's sleeves become too large, someone else's engagement becomes the week's approved excitement. You listen to carriage wheels below and feel half removed from your own life. The French clock on the mantel keeps its calm little beat. Time in the upstairs rooms becomes both slower and more exact. Even here, the performance does not quite stop. A loose tea gown still has to suggest refinement rather than collapse. Hair still wants brushing and pinning. A visitor too intimate to refuse must find you composed enough to reassure her. If the confinement lasts into summer, Newport offers its own version of polite vanishing. A cottage with salt wind and closed shutters can hide a great deal. Tennis laughter drifts across the lawn, while one bedroom stays quietly out of the circuit. Letters sent from there are careful about tone. You must not sound dramatic. You must sound improved by rest, touched by the air, and utterly uninterested in explaining further. The return is almost as managed as the retreat. First there may be a short drive, then perhaps a call from one or two approved women. Later you reappear at dinner with a waist that has resumed its public duties. The child exists, of course, but enters society by stages of its own. The mother is expected to look as if she has stepped briefly behind a curtain and come back tidier than before. That expectation has an odd sweetness and an odd cruelty. It wraps a private upheaval in smooth silk and asks the silk to take all the credit. A nursery upstairs and a composed face downstairs must somehow balance. In practical terms, the body is never off duty for long. Pins return, fittings return, advice returns in stacks so tall they might require separate furniture. Older women recommend broths, walking, sea baths, massage, quiet, iron, less tea, more tea, and the exact right hour for lying flat after luncheon. No two lists agree. All are delivered with the confidence of scripture. The dressmaker comes back with her tape measure and her gentle lies. She murmurs that nothing has changed much. Then she inserts a discreet panel where there very obviously used to be certainty. By autumn, new bodices are cut, waistbands are moved, a favorite evening gown is remade with fresh trim and a more forgiving lining. The bill grows while everyone discusses your improved color. Debt, in such moments, hovers around the edges like a maid waiting for a bell. No one says so at tea, but appearances remain hungry creatures and must be fed regularly. You begin to understand that the hourglass itself is less a shape than a schedule. It is achieved in the morning, maintained all afternoon, corrected before dinner, and reconsidered in whispers before bed. When the hooks finally give way at night, the body does not simply relax into freedom. It bears the soft red marks of the day across the skin. The marks fade by morning, and the rules begin again. There is nothing theatrical about this in the household. It is too familiar for drama. Bridget folds the corset laces with the same weary care she gives to stockings that must survive one more wearing. The body is treated a little like silver. It must be polished, protected from damp, stored correctly, and never allowed to tarnish where callers can see. The comparison is unfair to both parties, but the house would recognize it at once. That is why even garments no guest will ever see matter so much. The nightdress must be clean and neatly trimmed. The wrapper for breakfast must suggest ease without surrender. Slippers must whisper rather than flap. Hair, once freed from the day's pins, still belongs to order. It is brushed out section by section. The scalp cools. The neck feels suddenly light, as if somebody has opened a window inside the body. Cold cream waits in a little pot on the dressing table. So does rose water. So does the small box for hairpins that somehow multiplies despite every effort to keep count. These quiet tasks are not vanity in the simple sense. They are repair work after a public shift. A woman in your world keeps herself ready because readiness is half the role. There are no true off weeks. Illness may dim the pace. Mourning may darken the palate. Pregnancy may move life upstairs and behind closed doors. The management continues through all of it. That is the secret under the smooth silhouette. The hourglass is not hiding one truth. It is hiding dozens of little daily negotiations with fabric, appetite, posture, weather, sorrow, and time. You feel this most keenly on ordinary days, which are really the days where the work shows itself. A dinner invitation can be declined. A body still has to be arranged by breakfast. The line of the skirt must not reveal tiredness. The bodice must not confess grief too early or recovery too late. The face must look rested, even when rest has come in fragments. Sometimes you think the whole system is built from tiny acts of translation. A headache becomes a scheduling matter. A pregnancy becomes a period of country air. A bereavement becomes crepe, then bombazine, then lavender ribbon. A household full of women learns to read this language without seeming to notice it. A lifted hem, an altered seam, a changed glove, a shade of gray, and the entire room understands what may be said. You learn it too because you must. You learn how a dress can ask for sympathy, caution, admiration, or privacy. You learn how silence can be stitched directly into a bodice. And yet there is comfort in the routine, even now. The same hands pin the collar. The same clock ticks on the mantel. The same evening tray appears with warm milk or tea and a biscuit nobody intends to mention. Outside, another carriage passes along Fifth Avenue. Somewhere 2 brownstones away, Mrs. Vandermeer is likely calling something very brave indeed. Here, the house settles around you with its familiar sighs and soft shutting doors. The laces rest in their drawer for a few hours. The black crepe hangs in the wardrobe beside lavender not yet permitted. Upstairs, folded linens wait in a chest, quiet as sleeping birds, and you, at last, are allowed to be still for a little while. The first bill of the day never comes to the front door. It arrives while you are still stirring cream into your tea. You hear the soft knock below stairs, and then the brief travel of steps through the back passage. The front hall is for roses, collars, and polished hats. The back hall is for folded paper, brown parcels, and small quiet truths. From the breakfast room, you can smell beeswax from the hall table and gardenias from the conservatory. The French clock on the mantel keeps time with a patient little tick that never seems alarmed by anything. The house itself looks as though money simply grows inside it. The silver is bright. The napkins are heavy. The coffee pot reflects the window lace in a neat curved shine. On the sideboard there is a dish of grapes that did not come from any reasonable local vine. There are rolls still warm under a folded cloth. There is orange marmalade in a crystal jar with a tiny spoon that feels too elegant for jam. None of these things were paid for this morning. That is the first soft rule of the life you have married into. The house must look as though abundance is its natural climate, like weather that has taken a liking to your address. The actual money moves elsewhere. It moves in ledgers, on tabs, through notes, and between men who never appear in the drawing room. It moves through little doors and side gates and account books with buckram covers. You learn quickly that wealth, in your set, is not a pile of coins. It is an arrangement of timing. The butcher sends his account at the end of the week. The florist sends his at the end of the quarter. The wine merchant waits longer than either, because patience is included in the price of claret. The cost of the hothouse gardenias is not discussed while guests admire them. The fish for Friday dinner is praised under candlelight and billed 2 mornings later through the servants' entrance. Even the coal keeps its own strange manners. It arrives dirty and honest in the basement. It appears transformed upstairs as drawing-room warmth and flattering lamplight. That is the trick of the thing. In public, the house offers only smooth surfaces. In private, its comfort rests on a great hidden lattice of credit, delay, promises, and tact. The servants know the rhythm of it with a precision almost musical. The tradesmen's boys come at certain hours. The parcels are placed in certain corners. The envelopes are handed to certain hands, and absolutely not to others. Bridget knows from the sound of paper alone whether a note is from your dressmaker or your milliner. She can tell by the weight of a box whether it holds gloves, slippers, or trouble. This morning, her sigh is short. It means disapproval, but not disaster. She sets your correspondence beside the toast rack with careful fingers. The personal notes go nearest your cup. The tradesman's envelopes stay beneath a folded napkin, as if modesty can improve figures. You touch the top one with a butter knife before you open it. The paper is thick, cream, and faintly scented with starch and shop dust. It is from the florist. The amount is not absurd. That would almost be easier. It is merely large enough to remind you that flowers, like society, are most costly when meant to seem effortless. There have been luncheon tables bright with white roses. There have been dinner vases packed with maidenhair fern. There was also that week of gardenias for no reason beyond a visiting cousin's sharp eye. The flowers are never only flowers. They are also proof that the house is lively. They are evidence that no economy is taking place. They say there is no need to count. You fold the paper once and place it under your saucer. It makes the china sit a shade unevenly. That tiny tilt feels like the whole season. A new wife in New York is expected to understand this without formal instruction. No one sits you down and says that elegance is often a series of postponed payments with very good posture. You are simply shown a life already in motion. Then you learn where not to look for the wheels. At first the numbers seem to hide out of politeness. Then you begin to see that they are hidden on purpose, because too much daylight spoils the effect. A dinner table should look as though it assembled itself from silver and lilies. It should not look like 6 separate invoices, a cook's negotiation, and a butler's headache. The guests at the front door receive one performance. The servants at the back door manage another. Both are perfectly rehearsed. If one looked too closely at the machinery, everyone would have to admit how much cranking is involved. The grand houses on Fifth Avenue depend upon this kindly refusal to inspect. Not one of them would improve under bright accountancy. You notice it in small ways. A lady who speaks airily of Paris keeps a sharper eye on candle ends than on conversation. A man who orders Roman punch for 60 guests asks in a lower voice whether the oysters may be 1 course fewer. Nothing is false exactly. It is simply arranged. The silver really is silver. The peaches really are peaches. It is only the moment of payment that behaves like a shy relation and prefers the back stairs. By the 2nd month of your marriage, you begin to recognize the papers by touch. Thin blue for the laundress, stiffer cream for the jeweler, a gray folded sheet from the grocer, smelling faintly of tea chests and soap. The most private papers are not the love letters. They are the running accounts. These are the papers that never sit openly in the morning room. They live in drawers, dispatch boxes, blotters, and pockets. They travel folded into reticules and return hidden inside guidebooks or music folios. A calling card can ruin a week. A bill can ruin a year. This part deserves to be told plainly. For all the glitter of your world, money can suddenly stop behaving like a smooth current. It can go shallow under a family's feet, while the carpets still look thick and the lamps still burn. A merchant may wait longer than he meant to wait. A bank may turn cooler. A husband may have investments that are called sound until they are no longer described at all. Then the house continues for a while, out of habit and nerves. The flowers keep coming if the florist believes they will be settled. The carriage still rolls if the stable account remains just believable enough. That interval is the most delicate part. Nothing outward changes at once. The napery is still aired. The brass still gleams. The soup still arrives clear, because a cook can do wonders with bones, onions, and dignity. It is rather like a lamp trimmed carefully so the flame looks steady from across the room. Only the person nearest the oil knows how much is left. You do not speak of such things directly at table. You do not even think of them in a direct way if you can help it. You think instead of the number of footmen needed for dinner and whether the florist's man looked offended. The running tab at your dressmaker's is a special kind of quiet. It is not merely a bill. It is a biography written in silk, braid, buttons, and haste. You do not pay for a gown as a shop girl buys ribbon. You select a fabric, perhaps two. You choose a bodice shape, a sleeve, a trimming, and a time of delivery that belongs more to fantasy than to calendars. Then the dress is made, altered, delivered, adjusted again, and entered into a notebook. The price gathers itself in pieces, which is the most dangerous way for any price to behave. There's the silk itself, there's the lining, there's the lace insertion that seemed modest in a sample strip and somehow became extensive around a full skirt. There are covered buttons that multiply in silence. There are hook and eye fastenings. There are extra lengths of taffeta, because a sleeve puff looked mean without them. Then there is labor. Labor appears on paper in neat little lines that suggest calm and fairness. Labor in the fitting room feels more like 5 women pinning urgency around your ribs, while a tape measure mutters numbers near your ear. The dressmaker's book keeps all of this with admirable memory. It remembers the ivory satin slippers dyed to match. It remembers the replacement of one collar after tea was spilled. It remembers that the train was shortened for Newport and restored for town. You would almost prefer it to forget. The danger of a running tab is its softness. A single payment has edges. A running account is like velvet over a trapdoor. Because each visit ends with courtesy and not with coin, the garments seem to float into your wardrobe on good breeding alone. The body knows better when Bridget lifts them from their tissue paper. She knows the weight of unpaid elegance. She hangs the new gowns with the caution of a woman handling weather. A long, slow sigh escapes her when she smooths the dove-gray wrapper away from the taffeta you wore last week. It is a beautiful gown. The silk gives a dry little whisper when the skirt moves. Its color changes with the light from plum to smoke and back again. The pleated trimming at the bodice sits exactly where it should, which is a separate miracle from the matter of cost. You had chosen it partly because it was restrained. That is what you told yourself in the fitting room. Restraint, however, becomes expensive in New York with almost comic speed. The plain gown requires better silk. The better silk requires better gloves. The better gloves require sleeves that deserve to be seen. Soon a modest intention has turned into a line item large enough to have feelings. The household pretends not to notice this, because everyone benefits from the pretense. Your husband is pleased when you look as though his house runs well. Your callers are reassured when your dresses match the scale of your rooms. The dressmaker is satisfied if she believes your account lives in respectable company. Respectability in these matters is nearly as useful as cash. Sometimes it is more useful, at least for a season. The person who understands that best is not the hostess and not the husband. It is the social secretary. Miss Green arrives each day with ink on her fingers and the face of a woman who has read every secret twice. She keeps invitation lists, visiting dates, menu reminders, charitable subscriptions, and those small warnings that save whole weeks. She also keeps, by some silent amendment to her duties, the map of what may be spent now and what must look as though it already has been. Her desk is not grand. It sits in the morning room near the best winter light. There are trays for correspondence, stacks of engraved notepaper, sealing wax, postage scales, a date book, and a locked drawer with a key no one mentions. In one column she notes which ladies are to be asked for Thursday tea. In another, very near it, she marks whether the florist may be paid before the musicale or after. She knows which dinners can be smaller without seeming smaller. She knows that 12 at table may look deliberate while 14 looks strained if the second footman has been dismissed. She knows that a charity bazaar subscription must never fail publicly. She knows that a new pair of opera gloves may safely wait if last season's can be revived with patience and a little steam. In another age, a person like Miss Green might be called half secretary and half magician. In yours, she is paid modestly to hold together social weather systems using pencil marks. Your social calendar and your financial appearance lie together on her desk, as snugly as spoons in a drawer. If one slips, the other rattles. She is the one who suggests that the luncheon flowers be white narcissus instead of orchids. She says it is more tasteful for March, which is true, and also several dollars kinder. She advises that Mrs. Vandermeer be invited to a musicale supper rather than a dinner. A supper requires fewer alarming centerpieces and allows sandwiches to masquerade as intention. She recommends one more week before settling the lace invoice, because the dressmaker is more patient when her cousin has just been included in a charity committee. The knowledge sounds cold when laid out plainly. In practice, it feels almost domestic. A household is always adjusting. It is simply that this household adjusts in silk stockings. Miss Green never uses the word debt unless she is writing it into a private memorandum. Out loud, she prefers gentler phrases. An account is still standing. A payment is not yet presented. A bill is with the others, which suggests a pleasant tea party among papers. Her face changes only once, and that is when an account becomes known below stairs too widely. Then she closes the ledger and looks at the window as if considering emigration. You learn in time that financial strain may be shared only in carefully measured circles. The house has its own map of trust. The butler must know some part of it. He handles wine merchants, fish orders, candles, and all those respectable liquids that support civilization. He can reduce a dinner by 1 bottle per course without making the guests feel rationed. The housekeeper must know another part. She sees linenware, soap use, breakage, coal bins, and whether the drawing room curtains truly require replacing or only an excellent brushing. Bridget must know the state of your clothes, and by extension a corner of your accounts. A lady's maid cannot keep gowns presentable if she thinks fabric, thread, and glove mending descend from heaven. Cook knows the shape of the pantry, which is a real kind of truth. She knows whether a turbot may be stretched by serving it with enough sauce and enough confidence. Beyond that ring, knowledge becomes dangerous. A footman can be loyal and still have a cousin in service 3 streets away. A parlor maid can mean no harm and still carry a remark into another kitchen, where it will pick up 2 additions and a bonnet before noon. The coachman must know when not to call for the Victoria, but he should never know why. Stable gossip travels faster than carriage horses, especially in wet weather. The hall boy must know almost nothing. A boy with buttons on his coat is a public utility for rumor. Even the laundress, who sees everything in cuffs and collars, is safer with fabric than with figures. She may suspect a reduced wash, but she need not learn the reason. So the household knowledge is portioned out like medicine. Each person gets enough for the task, and no more. It sounds severe when said this way. In practice, it feels like keeping drafts out of a room by shutting the right doors. Sometimes the strain shows itself only in substitutions. Fewer hothouse flowers, more polished greenery. A second dessert that depends on cream and cleverness rather than imported fruit. At other times it shows in postponement. The silver will be replated next month. The dining room carpet will certainly be turned before summer. The bill for the bookseller can wait, because books are patient and gentlemen like to seem so. Then there are the little economies that must never seem like economies. Old ribbons are turned inside out for work baskets. Candle stubs are melted together for servants' use. One carriage is sent instead of 2 with some pleasant fiction about preferring the air. When such adjustments are graceful enough, they even acquire a glow of taste. Moderation always looks richer when it appears to be chosen. Yet some expenses cannot be softened into style. The dressmaker's bill has a way of sitting upright, even when tucked beneath 10 other papers. It returns because dress is not optional in your world. It is a language you are required to speak fluently, every day, in changing weather and changing company. A breakfast gown says one thing, a visiting dress says another, a dinner gown, an opera wrap, a tea bodice, a carriage dress, and a proper black silk for obligations all line up like demanding relatives. Gloves must match the degree of the occasion, shoes must suit the hem length, even buttons have a social life. A frayed cuff can be forgiven in a scholar. It cannot be forgiven in a woman whose task is to appear untroubled. You feel this most sharply on fitting days. The dressmaker pins the skirt. The fitter crouches near the hem, with pins between her lips. A second woman stands back with her head bent, calculating trim the way a general might calculate supply, though with much softer manners. Someone says the overskirt wants weight. Someone else says the bodice needs a little more finish. These phrases sound harmless until they reach the invoice. You nod because the gown does indeed want weight. Everything in New York wants a little more finish. Then the paper arrives weeks later. By then the pleasure has moved into the wardrobe, and the figure seems almost rude for following it there. You are not meant to discuss such papers with other women. You are certainly not meant to compare totals, but totals leak into rooms by indirection. A lady says she has been overrun by fittings. Another says silk has become impossible this spring. A third says with a light laugh that she has resolved to wear old things, and no one believes her for a moment. Everyone is counting. No one is supposed to count aloud. This is why Mrs. Hartwell's remarks land with such excellent precision. She always chooses the place where silence has done the most work. She chooses morning tea because the room is gentle and the toast is innocent. She chooses the second cup when people have stopped defending themselves actively and begun merely to endure. Today she holds her saucer level and studies the taffeta skirt folded over your chair. The light from the window catches its sheen and seems to betray it. Mrs. Astor would never have permitted that much silk for a morning effect, she says at last, in the same tone one might use for discussing weather that has become personal. Then she adds, with a smile that could frost glass, that lion taffeta has risen shamefully in price since January. It is not the criticism that stings first, it is the number hidden inside it. Only a person who knows the shops, the yards, and the current rates could say it so calmly. Only a person with access to the language of your account could make the gown rustle like a confession. You set your spoon down on the tray beside the sugar tongs. The sound is small, but it feels louder than it should. Bridget, near the sideboard, takes a silent breath and decides for once not to sigh at all. Her mercy is almost touching. Mrs. Hartwell continues to butter toast with serene efficiency. She remarks that in her day a woman learned the moral value of trim by the age of 20. She does not say that your dressmaker has been extending generous credit. She does not say that she knows the account is still open. She does not need to say either thing. The whole sentence is built from what it implies. In your world, the most cutting financial observation is never about poverty. It is about management. To suggest that a bill exists is vulgar. To suggest that it exists because you have been careless is devastating. You realize in that moment how many people have been colluding in this soft illusion. The dressmaker by continuing to deliver, Miss Green by spacing out payments, Bridget by keeping tissue paper and shop boxes out of sight. The house itself has helped. Polished wood is an excellent accomplice, so is fresh tea. Even Mrs. Hartwell is helping, in her way. Her cruelty is not designed to expose you publicly. It is designed to remind you that society survives by private correction. She would never call attention to a debt before strangers. That would be bad form. She only wishes you to understand that she has noticed the contour of the strain. And once you understand that, you begin to see the house differently. The bowl of hothouse flowers on the center table is suddenly not decoration alone. It is a monthly decision. The footman's new livery braid is not merely handsome, it is timing. The dinner planned for next week becomes a small engineering problem in white satin and consommé. The fish can remain, the ice sculpture probably cannot. You think of the back door then. Throughout the city, while ladies sit in front rooms discussing charity, weather, and the regrettable decline of taste, bills come in through service entries with astounding punctuality. Wealth goes out by other paths, in drafts and notes and promises and extensions. Debt in high society is the original influencer life. The product is limitless ease, and the invoices arrive while everyone applauds the lighting. You almost smile at the thought, though not in Mrs. Hartwell's direction. The queer comfort of the system is that nearly everyone participates. The florist extends credit because he served 15 houses like yours and hopes for 20. The dressmaker is patient because her most profitable advertisement is a woman being admired in her work. The grocer sends the best tea because he knows who drinks it publicly. The carriage maker waits because a name on his ledger can matter as much as a payment date. This does not make the figures imaginary. It only wraps them in social fabric. A New York season is, in part, a great exchange of confidence. One person believes another can continue, and so for a while, she can. That is why ruin, when it comes, can seem to appear all at once. In truth, it has often been arriving gently for months, like dust on the hall stand. But on most days, the machine simply hums. The brownstone breathes. Notes are answered. Coal is scuttled in. Gloves are brushed. A luncheon is served on thin porcelain that looks more expensive than it feels. You go upstairs after breakfast with the odd sensation of carrying invisible parcels. Nothing in your hands has changed, yet the house seems full of tagged objects. The dressing room is cool. Tissue paper lies in one corner from yesterday's hat box. A spool of gray silk thread rests beside the work basket like a rebuke in miniature. Bridget lifts the taffeta from the chair and hangs it properly. The skirt gives that dry murmur again, as if silk were gossip woven flat. She says only that the hem has taken dust. You hear the truer message beneath it because by now you are learning her dialect. A gown on credit must be treated with almost religious care. The cuffs should be brushed after each wearing. The skirt braid must be checked for street mud. Hooks are to be fastened before storage because broken hooks have a way of multiplying expense. Nothing in the room is lavish by accident. The lavender sachets in the wardrobe cost little, but someone remembered them. The cedar hangers keep moths at bay, which is cheaper than new bodices. The maid turns gloves inside out to dry them properly. She pads sleeves with tissue so the shape keeps. She folds belts around cardboard rather than crushing them, because a crushed belt starts a chain of appointments. In such details, thrift and elegance stop opposing each other and become close companions. They are not friends exactly. They are more like cousins obliged to share a carriage. Later, Miss Green meets you with the household book open to a page of astonishing neatness. Her figures are small and upright. They look better behaved than the life they describe. She notes that the flower account must be settled before Thursday. She suggests gently that the musicale may proceed with fewer candles in the rear rooms, where everyone lingers only briefly anyway. She points out that the charity committee luncheons are expensive in hidden ways. There are not only sandwiches and ices, but extra men to answer the bell, extra flowers in the hall, extra carriages waiting and shedding damp into the mews. Then she pauses over the dressmaker's line. There is no reproach in her face. That would be less useful than the pencil. She merely asks whether the plum taffeta should be closed now, or balanced against the black dinner bodice still unfinished. This is how financial reality reaches you here, not as a dramatic reckoning, but as a question about sequencing. To settle one account is to leave another standing politely with its hat in hand. To finish one gown is to delay a pair of evening slippers. To host brilliantly this week may mean visiting very simply next week. The art lies in making each choice look like taste. You begin to see that the city's great houses are filled with such choices. One woman is serving cold game because she prefers it, and also because it costs less than hot. Another chooses greenery over orchids from conviction, and also because the quarter has been unkind. Mrs. Vandermeer, who can scent vulnerability the way some people smell rain, once admired a restrained table and said, "How very brave of you," with a smile smooth enough to skate on. Since then you have distrusted every fern arrangement in Manhattan. Still, the game is not entirely grim. There is even a kind of domestic pride. A good household can bend without creaking. A clever cook can turn yesterday's cream into tomorrow's triumph. A butler with judgment can make a modest cellar seem philosophical rather than thin. Miss Green can move 2 invitations, 1 payment, and a flower order, and suddenly the week looks positively intentional. The danger comes when the bending must be done too often. Then style begins to feel less like taste and more like plaster holding a wall. You glimpse that risk in the servant's timing. When accounts are easy, the tradesmen's men wait in the back hall with patient boredom. When accounts are slow, they wait with hats in both hands and polite faces that have learned arithmetic. The difference is tiny, it is also enormous. A trusted servant can help smooth that difference, an untrusted one can sharpen it without meaning to. One delayed answer to a shop, one careless remark, and the city acquires a new little certainty by lunch. New York society loves discretion in theory. In practice, it loves information wearing a decent coat. This is why the silver calling card tray must never become mixed with trade papers. It has ideas of its own, and they are never helpful. Once, not long ago, it contrived to bury an important card beneath 3 irrelevant ones in a seed catalog. You have not forgiven it, though it sits in perfect polish, as if butter would not melt on its rim. Today, when Bridget carries in 2 return calls and a milliner's note at once, you eye the tray as one eyes a cat near a bowl. Some objects enjoy a crisis too much. The card tray belongs to the front hall performance. The bills belong to the back hall machinery. The whole household runs on keeping those worlds distinct. When they touch, even by accident, the effect is indecent. By afternoon, the house settles into its regular breathing. The carpets hush the steps. The clock on the mantel goes on with its gold little pulse. Somewhere below stairs, a knife sharpens against steel in a long, clean whisper. You sit at the writing table and answer 3 notes that have nothing to do with money and everything to do with it. One accepts a luncheon. One declines a drive because the carriage horses need rest, which they do, though not in the way stated. One confirms a tea at home, which is cheaper than a dinner and nearly as useful. Your pen scratches across thick cream paper. The ink dries with a dull shine. Outside, a wagon rattles past and fades into the long city afternoon. This is how the fiction holds, not by a single lie, but by 100 ordinary arrangements. A meal here, a delay there, a bouquet reduced, a lace bill postponed, a guest list narrowed without visible offense. You discover that the most expensive thing in the house is often not the silver or the carpets or the horses. It is continuity. To keep everything looking continuous is the real labor. The flowers must not suddenly stop. The dinners must not become abruptly plain. Your dresses must not fall one season behind the room. If they do, the city notices with that bland, tender cruelty it reserves for housekeeping failures and social chills. And yet, for all that, most days still feel peaceful from the inside. Tea is poured, letters are opened, a maid brushes velvet with short, even strokes. Someone in the kitchen peels apples in a long, unbroken ribbon. The house smells at 4 o'clock of coal warmth, starch, and faint violets. The scale of the life is large. The management of it is made from very small acts. By early evening, the bills are back in their drawer. Miss Green has folded one note into another. The florist will be paid. The dressmaker will wait a little longer, and wait graciously, because grace is part of her business. Mrs. Hartwell's observation still lingers, though, like a pin forgotten in a cuff. You understand now that her real point was not the silk. It was the rule beneath the silk. A woman in your place must know what her appearance costs, even when she is not the one writing the draft. She must know who is extending patience, who is keeping count, and who has begun to notice. She must also know when not to let that knowledge show. So at dinner, the candles are lit as usual. The soup is clear and fragrant with celery. The silver catches the lamplight and sends it back in a warm, obedient glow. No one at table would guess that half the day was spent arranging when paper should move and when it should remain still. That is the final oddity of the whole system. The better you learn it, the less anyone sees. From the front steps, the brownstone remains exactly what it ought to be. Its windows shine, its hall smells of polish and flowers. The servants open doors with practiced calm. Only at the back, where the deliveries come and the accounts are received, does the true skeleton show for a moment. Then even that is covered again with ledgers, tacked, and tomorrow. Upstairs, when Bridget loosens the hooks at your back and lifts the gown away, the taffeta sighs more softly than she does. She hangs it in the wardrobe with proper space around the sleeves. She smooths the skirt once, checks the hem braid, and leaves the door ajar for air. The gown looks serene in the dim room. One would never suspect it has caused a morning of arithmetic and a lecture before toast. You sit for a moment in your wrapper and stockings, feeling the house settle around you. Somewhere a door closes below. Somewhere else a coal scuttle gives a faint iron sound against stone. The city beyond the curtains is full of other houses doing the same sums in other drawers. Other women are taking off silk. Other secretaries are sharpening pencils. Other aunts are saying kind, terrible things over tea. And all of you, in one way or another, are keeping the lamps looking easy. The French clock goes on ticking. It is not impressed by prices, nor comforted by credit. It only marks the hours in which the performance must continue. You begin to understand that this, too, is part of marriage in your world. Not only learning names and calls and seating plans, but learning the hidden beams behind the scenery. A fortune is admired in public. Its supports are tended in private. Tomorrow there will be flowers again on the center table. There will be notes to answer and sleeves to brush and perhaps another envelope carried quietly through the back passage. For tonight the drawer is shut. That is not the same as being empty. It is simply shut, which in this house counts for a great deal. You let that thought rest where it is, like folded gloves set carefully beside a bed. Then the room grows still, and the day with all its figures softens into silk, beeswax, and the far-off sound of carriage wheels fading up Fifth Avenue. The letter has waited all morning on the mantelpiece beside the French clock, as patient as a cat near cream. You have passed it 3 times already. Each time the pale seal looked more knowing than before. Now the room is quiet enough for it. You can hear the clock tick through the scent of gardenias and beeswax. Your finger finds the edge of the envelope. The paper is thick and cool, with the faint grit of good linen stuck. A little flake of sealing wax rests near the fold. It has left a red dust mark on the white marble. Bridget sets down the tray for your second cup and gives a brief exhale. That is the sigh for manageable trouble. She does not look at the letter. She looks a very careful inch to the left of it. You use the ivory knife from the writing table. The blade slips under the flap with a soft, dry tear. Even that sound feels louder than it should. In this house, paper can be noisier than doors. Inside is one folded sheet and a smaller card. The sheet smells faintly of violets and sealing wax. The hand is neat and practiced. It has the smooth, calm look of a woman who has ruined nobody before noon. The note is from Mrs. Allerton, though written by someone else. Her own hand is famous for shaking after luncheon. She asks if you might come on Thursday at 4. She asks it in the softest possible way. It is not an at-home. It is not exactly a tea. It is not, she says, a visit to be spoken of generally. She would value your company for a very quiet hour. The company will be most select and entirely sympathetic. Mrs. Fenwick, recently returned and not yet receiving, may join them for a short time if strength permits. That sentence sits on the page like a covered dish. Everyone can smell what is inside, and nobody lifts the lid. Mrs. Fenwick has been away for 9 months. She has been, as letters said, resting abroad with a relation. She has returned thinner in the face and broader in the caution surrounding her. Society notices both things at once. If you go, you place yourself gently at her side. If you decline, you leave a clear, empty space. The smaller card contains the rest. Mrs. Beekman will attend if the gathering remains truly limited. Mrs. Vandermeer has also been asked, though the note says this as if it were a weather report. That is the point at which the room feels warmer. Tea with one woman under a cloud is charity. Tea with that woman and Mrs. Vandermeer becomes a test. Your teacup suddenly seems to require legal advice. Mrs. Hartwell would call it nonsense dressed in lace. Then she would begin with her usual invocation of Mrs. Astor. You can already hear the shape of it. Mrs. Astor would never have permitted a quiet tea to become a public rescue mission. The trouble is that Mrs. Allerton is useful. She fills boxes, arranges introductions, and remembers anniversaries with almost clerical force. The trouble is also that Mrs. Fenwick is liked. Liking someone never simplifies anything in New York. You read the note again more slowly. The dangerous parts are not the words themselves, but the spaces between them. Not yet receiving means she cannot be seen to ask for callers. Quiet hour means everyone will discuss it by supper. Entirely sympathetic means nobody sharp must be present. The inclusion of Mrs. Vandermeer means somebody sharp already is. You turn the paper toward the window. The pale winter light shows the pressure of the pen through the page. The letters press hardest on the line asking for your answer by messenger. Delay in this case is also a reply. A letter like this never contains one invitation. It contains 6 and 3 refusals and a map of future consequences. It is society folded into quarters. When you unfold it, the air changes around your chair. You lay the paper flat on the blotter. The blotter is green felt, worn smooth at the corners by other worries. The ink has dried to a brownish black. The small card is cream with a raised border and no more than 13 words. Such brevity is never kind. It leaves all the labor to the reader. That is the first rule with letters here. Paper must look innocent, even when it carries enough charge to light a ballroom. You may write times and menus in the name of the soprano. You may mention flowers, weather, and a nephew with a cough. You may not write the true reason a cousin left Newport so suddenly. You may not write why a dinner is suddenly smaller. If a woman is ill, she is tired. If she is tired for months, she is abroad. If her husband is absent, he is delayed. If he is delayed for a season, he is attending to business. Everything sharp must be wrapped in wool before it enters the mail. Otherwise, the post itself begins to feel dangerous. Even ordinary notes obey a strict little choreography. The best paper comes from a drawer that smells faintly of cedar and starch. You choose one sheet, never two, unless the matter is either very dull or very grave. Both kinds take space. Ink is filled fresh, because weak ink looks careless. A careless note suggests a careless house. A lady's monogram sits at the top or not at all. Black borders say morning before the first word is read. The envelope must be addressed in the same hand. A different hand suggests haste, illness, or a secretary who knows too much. Stamps are pressed flat, so they do not peel in damp weather. The flap must close cleanly with no gummy ridge. Blots matter. Crossings out matter even more. You may scratch out a date if you are writing to family. You do not scratch out a name to society. If a sentence is wrong, the whole page is wrong. You begin again and let the wastebasket keep your first panic. That basket can hold half a reputation by noon. Bridget empties it as if lifting laundry. She never rustles the pages more than needed. Even paper deserves modesty in her hands. Society correspondence was rather like a family group chat on thick cream paper. Everyone assumed someone unsuitable might eventually read it. For that reason, letters learned to speak sideways. A direct statement was seen almost as bad manners. You did not write that Mrs. Fenwick had been absent under difficult circumstances. You wrote that you hoped her strength was returning. You did not write that Mrs. Vandermeer collected private facts like roses. You wrote that her company was always vivid. You did not write that Aunt Hartwell would consider the whole tea a decline in standards. You wrote that prior obligations might claim you. A good note gave every reader a place to stand. That way nobody had to say where the floor really ended. This part deserves to be told plainly. A letter could do real harm long after the writer felt safe. A foolish note might be shown to a husband. It might be copied by a cousin, or kept in a locked desk. It might surface in a family quarrel 10 years later. It might be read aloud with the names omitted and the meaning intact. So there were things no sensible woman committed to paper. Not amounts owed if the sums were painful. Not a suspicion about a child's expected arrival. Not a complaint about drink or cards or some actor too often admired. Not the true reason a girl was staying with relatives. Not the true reason she returned looking pale and carefully older. Some families kept bundles of letters tied with ribbon. The ribbons looked harmless, which was exactly the problem. A dead mother's notes might be saved. A husband's first courtship letters might be kept in silk. But anything that might one day need explaining had to lose its chance. Fire was the only editor society fully trusted. There was usually a small domestic rhythm to it. The note was read once by daylight and once again after dinner. Then it went to the grate with the other dangerous crumbs of the day. A corner touched to the flame first. The paper curled almost at once. The ink lifted in tiny brown blisters before turning to feathered black. Sealing wax gave a sweet, sharp smell when it softened. Monograms vanished fastest, which felt both useful and poetic. You learned to watch until the very last edge. Half-burned paper has a vulgar talent for surviving. The brass tongs by the hearth were not only for coal. They had rescued many women by being very final. Ash needed stirring. A whole surname could linger in the grate if left folded under itself. In the morning, Bridget carried out the tray from the fireplace. The ashes looked exactly like ordinary ashes. That sameness was the comfort of it. Reputation, once burned properly, resembled yesterday's newspaper and dead rose leaves. There were women who saved everything anyway. They kept notes in satin boxes and trusted future generations to be discreet. This was optimistic in the way some hats are optimistic. Pretty, costly, and not much protection from weather. Bridget knows the habits of your desk better than any cousin does. She knows where fresh wafers are kept and which drawer sticks. She knows that one pen scratches and one flows. She knows which envelopes you use for formal replies and which for family. She also knows the weight of a letter before it is opened. A thin note is routine, and a heavy one sighs. When she brought the morning tray, she touched nothing beyond the saucer. Yet she had already read half the room. An unfamiliar hand meant uncertainty. A sealed flap without a card meant privacy, or at least the hope of it. A messenger waiting below meant urgency. A wax seal instead of plain gum meant either romance or trouble, and usually not the first. Bridget would never say any of that aloud. She has given her loyalty to silence, with regional variations expressed through breath. A short sigh means a poor choice in ribbon. A long, slow one means a matter has entered the house that may require prayer. The sound she made when you slit Mrs. Allerton's note was somewhere in between. It suggested upholstered danger. She turns now to straighten the ribbons in your work basket. They do not need straightening, which is how you know she is thinking. Bridget can fold tissue around a hat, sort gloves by shade, and pack 3 trunks in under an hour. She can also hear a lie through walnut doors. She knows when your husband has sent flowers because the florist wraps his parcels too tightly. She knows when Mrs. Hartwell has written because even the envelope disapproves. She knows when you mean to answer at once. Your left glove comes off before you have decided it consciously. The covenant between mistress and maid is never spoken, because spoken rules invite dangerous clarity. Instead, it grows from ordinary tasks. She buttons you into gowns that do not forgive a large breakfast. She shakes out your sleeves and receives your gloves after calls. She brings hot water for sealing wax. She carries notes to the hall without looking at the superscriptions longer than custom allows. In return, you leave certain things safely unnamed. You do not ask whether she noticed the second page missing. You do not ask whether the parlor maid mentioned the messenger's face. You do not ask if anyone saw the ash before it cooled. She does not ask why a note must be burned before luncheon. She does not ask why another is saved under the linen handkerchiefs. That is how houses keep breathing. Everyone knows where the seams are, and nobody picks at them in daylight. Bridget is literate, of course. Nearly everyone in your world forgets that, until a servant's silence becomes priceless. She reads labels on medicine bottles, she reads train timetables, and the instructions from the French dressmaker that arrive folded like tiny battles. So when she pretends not to read, it is an act of great social generosity. It is one of the most polished manners in the house. Once, while dusting, she set a note face down before the ink had fully dried. The print of a single word stayed on her thumb. She washed it off with vinegar and said nothing. The faint smell lingered all morning near your cuffs. Now she brings the sealing stand closer to your elbow. The wax stick rests beside the little box of matches and the seal. She has not been told you will reply at once. She has simply arranged the tools for the answer. That is her real gift. She prepares for the secret without insisting on being let inside it. In houses like this, many truths are carried that way, not openly, but carefully, from one room to the next. Everyone knows which cousin is too fond of Monte Carlo and which uncle is too fond of actresses. Nobody writes those preferences down. Everyone knows why a nursery was prepared and then quietly turned back into a schoolroom. The curtains change before the explanation does. Everyone knows when a husband takes rooms at his club more often than his own table. Letters call it pressure of work. Everyone knows when a girl is sent to the country to regain color. Notes describe fresh air, milk, and blessed quiet. The silence around such things is not empty. It is densely furnished, like a parlor where every chair has a purpose. A hostess depends on that silence as she depends on candles and clean glasses. Without it, nothing flattering can be lit. So Mrs. Allerton's note does not say that Mrs. Fenwick needs public kindness. It says only that sympathy will be present. It does not say that some women are still uncertain whether to receive her. It says the company will be very limited. It does not say that attendance will be noticed and repeated, It says she will be grateful for your company. The whole city reads this language easily. New York society could decipher euphemism faster than French menus. A woman might vanish for months and return with a thinner face and a family resemblance in her cradle. Letters would mention improved health. Another might give up evening engagements after a sorrow. Notes would refer to nerves, rest, and the comfort of staying quiet. A marriage might cool to the temperature of silver plate. Invitations would continue to include both names until it became awkward for stationers. No one was fooled. Being unfazed was simply part of the costume. There is a mercy in that costume. Now and then, it lets a person cross a room before being turned into a topic. There is also a cruelty in it. It requires smiling through weather that should permit an umbrella. You smooth Mrs. Allerton's letter again. The paper crackles very softly under your palm. Mrs. Fenwick is being offered one careful step back into sight. A dozen women will decide how wide that step may be. Mrs. Vandermeer will certainly arrive in dove gray and moral neutrality. She will say something kind enough to repeat and sharp enough to keep. How very brave of you, she will likely tell someone. With her, praise always feels like a pin hidden in velvet. You may be seen as tender-hearted. You may also be seen as eager for delicate scenes. If you do not attend, you preserve caution. You may also seem chilly, which is never lovely on a wife in her first seasons. The answer must carry warmth without enthusiasm. It must offer support without appearing hungry for information. You draw a sheet toward you and test the pen. The nib opens on the page with a clean, dark line. At once you reject the first beginning. Dear Mrs. Allerton sounds right, but too ordinary for such an odd kindness. My dear Mrs. Allerton is warmer. Warmth, however, can be quoted later. You start again with many thanks for your kind note. It is not memorable, which is one of its better qualities. Then comes the sentence that matters. You would be pleased to come on Thursday at 4, if it remains convenient. If it remains convenient is your little parasol. It shades everyone from the fact that convenience is not the true issue. Next, you must name nobody too clearly. You write that you shall be glad of a quiet hour in sympathetic company. Even that feels almost frank. You blot it carefully and consider whether quiet should become pleasant instead. Pleasant sounds frivolous. Quiet sounds deliberate. You leave it as it is and pray the blotter has not judged you. The note should end before it becomes thoughtful. Thoughtfulness on paper is rarely safe. You add a line of regard. You do not add affection. Affection once written can travel farther than intended. Regard knows its station and wears proper boots. Bridget appears beside the coal fire with the small silver tray for outgoing notes. It is not the hall tray, which is fortunate. Its larger cousin has already shown enough personality this season. One tray in a household should be dramatic, and that is plenty. She holds the candlestick steady while you warm the wax. The flame paints a small shine on the brass tongs. You fold the sheet into thirds. The paper must close neatly, so it opens without accusation. Your seal leaves a clean impression. It looks firmer than you feel. The draft you did not send lies beside your elbow. 2 lines only, and both a little too direct. One says you would be honored. That is the sort of phrase a rival might underline mentally for future use. The other says you hope Mrs. Fenwick is stronger. That is almost a diagnosis, which would never do. You feed the draft into the fire yourself. It blackens from the bottom edge and folds inward like a hand closing. Bridget does not watch the words disappear. She watches for sparks near the rug, which is another form of loyalty. For a moment the room smells of warm paper and singed wax. Then it smells only of coal and gardenias again. That small return to normal is one reason burning matters. It restores the room to furniture, tea, and harmless surfaces. Bridget takes the sealed reply and sets it on the tray. Her fingers leave no mark on the envelope. Then she gives an audible inhale and follows it with complete silence. This is her highest form of comment. You almost laugh, but softly, because she is usually right. A silent house often means a noisy afternoon. The messenger will come up from the kitchen hall in a moment. His boots will be wiped twice before he reaches the front. Bridget will hand over the note as if it contains no more than a declined luncheon. He will bow as if he believes her. By evening, 3 women may know you are coming. By tomorrow, 9 may know, while still insisting nothing has been arranged. That is the strange comfort of this world. Its secrets are rarely hidden, only wrapped well enough to be carried. You sit back and listen to the clock again. The hands have moved less than the matter seems to deserve. The little red flake of broken seal still waits by the marble edge. It is the only visible wreckage. Soon Bridget will brush it away with the crumbs from tea. The letter itself will be locked in your desk until night. Then perhaps it will go the same quiet way as the draft. Or perhaps it will remain one more day, because prudence has moods. Either choice will look trivial from across the room. That is how most great social labor appears. A folded page, a measured line, a servant who notices everything and reports nothing but weather through sighs. You rise at last, and smooth your skirt where it is creased against the chair. Silk forgives less than people do. From the hall comes the faint clink of cards shifting on silver. The tray is awake again, which means the city is too. And somewhere between your desk and the front door, one sealed reply begins its careful journey into other hands. You can still see the dinner table in its mild gold light. The candles made the crystal look calm and kind, and every small rule of the meal kept the room moving without a sound. You held your shoulders easy against the chair back. You remembered which fork came next, when to lower your voice, and how never to lean too far into any pleasure, not even the very good sauce. You can still feel the neat little pause before you answered Mrs. Vandermeer across the flowers. Her polished phrase drifted over the plates as smooth as cream, and your reply came back just as smooth, which was the closest thing that world allowed to a bow and a draw. Nothing was won in any grand way. Still, the card that had sat so long in the silver tray seemed at last to have been answered in the only language that mattered. And then there is the quiet ride home after midnight. Fifth Avenue had thinned into soft gaslight and dark windows, and the horses went on at that patient pace, which makes even a hard evening feel almost forgivable. The brownstone waited with its own familiar hush. Beeswax, gardenias gone faint in the hall, and the steady little tick of the ormolu clock were all still at their posts, as if the house had kept your place warm. Later came the true end of the day. Bridget stood behind you in the bedroom silence, and the laces gave way a little at a time, until breath came low and full again, and the whole long performance slipped gently to the floor with the taffeta. There is such comfort in that plain nightly work. Hooks are eased free, pins are set in their dish, slippers wait by the rug, and every secret carried since morning remains where it belongs. Now the night can settle over all of it. The room is dim and soft, and the day feels folded away like gloves lay flat in a drawer. The quiet has a kind weight to it. It rests over the house, over the street, and over the thoughts you do not need to carry any farther tonight. Down in the hall, the silver calling card tray sits still for once, empty enough to look almost innocent. May your dreams be free of compliments with hidden edges. May your calling card tray always be full, and may tomorrow's cards stay exactly where Bridget swears she left them. May your corset laces be forever loose, and may Bridget's sighs tonight be only brief. Thank you for listening. Keep your heart light, and good night.